Chapter 502. As soon as Royally said this, for some reason, the deep forest really quieted down. Liwuyo looked at Royally, then at Bane, his eyes full of confusion. Bane was also a bit embarrassed. If he didn't know that Royally really didn't know about his younger days, he would have thought that his son was trying to goad him. Bane was a bit embarrassed by Liwuyo's questioning gaze. "What are you looking at? Who hasn't done a few outrageous things when they were young? Do you know that your father drank in brothels all day long when he was young? Do you know that when your grandfather was young, he promised the Emperor's sword-to-sword saint after one night of drunkenness and then went back on his word the next day when he woke up? Uncle Bane didn't tell you what happened back then?" Liwuyo looked at Royally and asked. Royally shook his head. Although he knew that his father was indeed extraordinary, the specifics. Fu Qing didn't tell him. "There's nothing to talk about," Bane said. "How could that be?" Liwuyo said, "Uncle Bane's deeds are now a legend of the Middle Empire." "What deeds?" Royally asked. "My father said that Uncle Bane is probably the best thief in the world," Liwuyo said. "Thief?" Royally was shocked. Then he looked at his father. How did he suddenly become a thief? "No!" Royally suddenly came back to his senses and realized that something wasn't right. Thief wasn't a glorious profession, but when Liwuyo brought it up, his father's eyes didn't show any shame, and Liwuyo's eyes were full of admiration. Uncle Bane did a lot of earth-shattering things when he was young, but as a citizen of the Middle Empire, let's talk about something related to the Middle Empire. Uncle Bane once snuck into the Middle Empire's palace at night and tried to obtain the Imperial Seal. Even Uncle Sword Saint said that if it wasn't for him, Uncle Bane wouldn't have succeeded. Imperial Seal? Sword Saint? Royally was shocked. He looked at his father as if he was looking at a stranger. He finally understood why his father wasn't ashamed at all. There was nothing to be ashamed of for being a thief to this extent. Enter the palace to steal the Imperial Seal? Was this something a thief should do? Lord Sword Saint, you flatter me. Bane cupped his hands towards the east as he spoke. He was still very respectful towards the Sword Saint. Even if Lord Sword Saint wasn't there at the time, my chances of success would still be very slim. But Uncle Long and Auntie Aisha don't seem to think so. Liwuyo said, based on their personalities, if they didn't think that Uncle Bane was likely to succeed, they would have attacked the royal palace of the Middle Empire for the royal seal instead of asking you to waste your time. Bane thought that what you said made sense, but it really wasn't the case. Back then, Jilin wanted to take it by force, but Staya didn't agree because she was afraid of hurting the innocent. Ahem. Bane pretended to cough and changed his mind. He thought to himself, I'm really getting old. Why do I always remember things from so many years ago? Father. You and the Red Disaster have known each other for many years? Royally finally asked the main point. We knew each other before you. Bane said something that many fathers would say. Also, you should call him Uncle Long like Wuyo. Uncle Long trusts you a lot? Royally asked. Yes. Bane hesitated. It's not that he trusts me. He just doesn't care about my position. But now, we're more like-minded than ever. Then, the reason why I can enter the Red Dragon Palace so many times and have the title of a guide, is because of you? Silly child, what else do you think? Bane said. Those dwarves are just pretending not to see me? Is there something wrong with their eyes? Sigh. Bane sighed. He walked to Royally and pulled out the dagger at his waist. Do you know what this is? A dagger. Bane looked deeply at his son. For the first time, he wondered if there was something wrong with his brain. This is your birthday gift. The Dwarf King personally made it for you after he heard the news of your birth. It's just a gift. It's not much work, but a dagger made by the Dwarf King as your birthday gift has a lot of meaning. All the dwarves will treat you as their own child. In other words, more than 20 years ago, I met the dwarves for the first time in the Dwarf Kingdom. At that time, they were still living in a volcano on the edge of the Snow Wind Empire. Occasionally, there would be birds flying in the sky. When the dwarves were bored, they liked to shoot birds from a long distance and compare with each other. Most of them could hit 70 to 80% of the time. The dwarf friends had a hard time pretending that they couldn't see you. Bane patted Roeli's shoulder as he spoke and put the dagger back at Roeli's waist. Those dwarves saw this dagger. Then those elemental creatures. Bane reached out and picked out the pendant at Roeli's collar. Hanging from an ordinary hemp rope was a red gem that wasn't very round. "This is a gift from your Uncle Long," Bane said. "With this thing, not to mention those elemental creatures, even wyverns can fly you around if you want." "Uncle Bane." Bane was silent for a moment. "Jilin has been good to me. You want me to steal his things, Uncle Bane, for the sake of countless people, you promise me." Li Wuyu bowed deeply to Bane. As the princess of the empire, this was the most sincere gesture she could make. Bane also knew Li Wuyu's current mood. He helped her up. Stealing Jilin's things is impossible. In Red Dragon City, as long as Jilin wants to, he can know every move of everyone. The incomparably dense and omnipresent fire element there will also become his eyes and ears. If that's your plan, I advise you to give up on it as soon as possible. Of course, Li Wuyu wouldn't give up just like that. But with your relationship with Uncle Long, it's useless. Bane sighed. Don't be fooled by his big size and scary appearance. He's actually very stingy. When we were strolling on the road together, your Aunt Staya always paid for our meals. Jilin has money, but he never pays for it. He even wants to eat for free. He won't give the sunstone to me for free. Even if I'm lucky enough to steal it, he'll definitely pester me to get it back. If someone pesters me, they'll just throw a tantrum and act shamelessly. If he pesters me, he might move mountains and fill seas. Do you know that?" Li Wuyu was a little confused. It was because Bane's words contained too much information. But after thinking for a while, Li Wuyu decided to put it aside. "Uncle Bane, is there really no other way?" "Yes." No one expected that. Bane actually said that. "What?" Li Wuyu was overjoyed. "You're a princess who received royal education and has endless wealth. How can you not think of this?" Bane patted his forehead helplessly. "You can't steal it or rob it. You can buy it." "Buy it?" Li Wuyu was dumbfounded. "Yeah, don't think about stealing or robbing. We're civilized people." Bane lectured. Chapter 503. Li Wuyu looked at Bane, his mind full of shock. He thought to himself that the humans around the Red Calamity were indeed extraordinary. Don't keep thinking about stealing and robbing. What he said was true and very reasonable, but the problem was that he should be the one saying it. Wasn't it too abrupt for the number one thief in the world to say something like that? How could he say something like that? Although Li Wuyu had a lot to say in his heart, he thought that this was a very urgent moment. Uncle Bane wasn't wrong, so Li Wuyu could only laugh dryly. "Ah, Uncle Bane is right. We really didn't think of this method, so we overlooked it," Li Wuyu said. "But Uncle Bane, if you want to buy it, Uncle Dragon will definitely ask about the use of the Sunstone. How will you answer then?" "He won't ask." Bane said, "Don't try to figure him out with your thoughts. As long as you bring the gold to him, he will give you a return that is beyond your imagination." "Oh?" Li Wuyu was deep in thought. Does that mean people can trade with Uncle Dragon? Bane raised a hand to signal Li Wuyu to stop. "There is a prerequisite for this method to succeed." "What is it?" Li Wuyu hurriedly asked. "That is, you are the daughter of the third prince." Bane said, "If someone else wants to buy something from him with gold, he won't sell it." "Why?" Roeli asked. Bane looked at his silly son speechlessly. "Because if he kills someone, the gold and the item will be his. But you are the daughter of the third prince, so it's fine. He won't kill you for a stone that he doesn't value." "Oh." Li Wuyu nodded. "Then how much gold did you bring this time?" Bane asked. Li Wuyu was stunned. "Don't tell me that the princess of the Middle Empire, the daughter of the Golden King, doesn't have any gold." Bane said. "This Liuyo was a bit annoyed by Bane's gaze. Gold is so heavy, who would carry it with them all the time? Furthermore, I'm still a man who roams the Jianghu. I know the principle of treasuring a jade ring becomes a crime. No matter what, you have no money? Bane asked. Liuyo looked at Bane and pursed his lips into a thin line. Finally, he reluctantly said, yes. Then, do you have money? Bane looked at Roeli. As the only adventurer who can bring people into the Red Dragon Palace, you must have earned a lot over the years, right? It's been so many years, and I've never seen you bring any money home. Take some out this time. No matter what, Liuyu is still your sister. Since she has asked for it, you can't not pay, right? Dad? Roeli stared at Bane, dumbfounded. Why am I involved in this? Cut the crap. Do you have money? Bane asked. No. Roeli puffed out his chest and said proudly. Bane frowned. Where's the money? I spent it. What did you do? This, speak. That. I went out and met a few friends. Bane immediately realized that something was wrong. If they were just ordinary friends, this kid wouldn't be so shy. Now that Bane was experienced, he knew what was going on after a little thought. Ben chuckled, then he looked at Roeli and said, Friend, a man or a woman? Female. How many is how many? Speak. Roeli weakly stretched out 5 fingers, but seeing that his father and Liuyo suddenly looked unfriendly, he quickly withdrew one of his fingers. TSK. Bane clicked his tongue. Then 4, 5 girls, do they know each other? Roeli was silent for a moment and organized his words in his mind. Not all. Understood. Bane nodded, and then kicked out fiercely. Roeli was now a famous adventurer, but he didn't see how his father kicked. He only vaguely saw a black shadow pass by, and then he felt a pain in his stomach and flew out. Seeing Roeli fly into a grassland and scream with full strength, Bane slowly withdrew his leg. This piece of trash, he's not useful at all, and he's embarrassing me. Niece Wuyo, please don't laugh. Uncle, what are you talking about? It's human nature. I heard that you're familiar with Batel's stone? Bane suddenly asked. Uncle Bane, why are you suddenly talking about this? Nothing. Bane spread his hands. How about this, since you don't have the gold, then the day after tomorrow. Bring Batel out of the Red Dragon Palace, and I'll take care of the rest. Uncle Bane, are you sure? Liuyo was overjoyed. Don't worry. Bane nodded. Since it's not stealing, but buying, you can rest assured. I wonder how Uncle Bane, don't worry about this niece, I just hope that when you go back, you can pass a message to the third prince. Please say. Jilin is not just a megalosaurus now, he's the king of all spirits' kingdom. What do you mean? Right now, humans are like antelopes to Jilin, like tigers to antelopes. But if the third prince succeeds, it will become a tiger to a tiger. Tigers won't easily invade each other's territory, so there's no need to kill each other. Liuyo was silent for a moment, then looked at Bane and said seriously, I'll remember it, and when I go back, I'll pass it on to Father word for word. You don't have to be so serious. Bane looked at the outline of the volcano in the distance and said, This is just the superficial view of me and the common people. The third prince is the king, and he stands at a very high position, so he can see further and clearer than me. Whether he listens to my suggestion or not, it's up to him. Bane turned to Roeli and said, Go home and accompany your mother for a few days. Yes, father. Roeli replied, But father, if Uncle Long finds out that you're helping the Golden King against him, won't he fall out with you? Bane smiled and patted his son's head, knowing that his son was worried about him. Son, there are too many good girls in the world, and you can't see all of them, but there's only one woman who can spend the rest of your life with you. So, choose one, and only treat one well, that's the smart thing to do. Roeli hesitated for a moment, then said, Yes, father. Bane smiled, I know you understand this, and I know it's difficult for you. After all, you became famous at a young age, but it's always easier said than done." "I understand, Father," Royally replied casually. It didn't look like he really understood. Bane didn't mind. As a father, he had to teach him what he needed to teach. As for how much he could learn, that was up to the child. After all, some things could be taught by force, and some things could only be learned by getting hurt and falling, and then climbing back up again. Although parents had experienced life, their children had taken many detours in life. That was the principle. "All right." Bane clapped his hands. "Go home, follow me to Xingming City." "Xingming City?" Li Wuyo's eyes were shining. "What for?" "To borrow money," Bane said. Chapter 504. 2 days passed in the blink of an eye. It was now the day Bane mentioned. Bane stood at the entrance of Red Dragon City with a green cloth bag half the size of a person on his back. The cloth bag straps were stretched straight. It looked like the bag was extremely heavy. The material of the cloth bag also looked very sturdy. There was not much to say about how Bane went to borrow the gold from the current Xingming king. Ever since Staya ruled as the Holy Queen, Bane could enter the Saimai Empire's palace without any hindrance. After Staya died in battle, the new king did not take away Bane's privilege. Therefore, Bane easily found the Xingming king. When Bane said he wanted to borrow it, the Xingming king did. The Xingming king knew how special this seemingly ordinary middle-aged man was. When Staya went to the Snow Wind Empire to carry the coffin, she was naturally prepared to die. Therefore, she arranged many things in advance before she left, including discussing with her father who would be the next Xingming king. She also told the heir many valuable secrets. For example, Bane carried the heavy gold to the entrance of Red Dragon City. He waved his hand but did not choose to enter through the entrance. 20 years was enough to change many things. However, the biggest change to the walls of Red Dragon City was that it no longer had a gate. The gate of Red Dragon City looked like it, but it did not. Because the door behind the gate was completely blocked by the dwarves. It was as sturdy as the rest of the city walls. The gate now was just a decoration on the wall. It could be opened, but after it was opened, there was still a wall behind it. Regarding this, the dwarf clan's explanation was that humans love to attack the city gates the most. If that was the case, they would block the gate and make it impenetrable. The dwarves also thought that the humans would think that there was a gate in Red Dragon City. They would send a group of elite suicide squads up the city walls. Those warriors fought bravely and bravely, bathed in blood. They had only one thought in their minds, which was to kill their way to the city gate and open it for the human army outside. However, when they came down from the wall and found that there was still a wall behind the door, what kind of despair would they feel then? Ha ha ha. Therefore, the fake city gate was now an anti-human design that the dwarves were proud of. It was a trap that they had painstakingly created for the humans. However, Bane felt that they would not be able to see this trap in their lifetime. As long as Jilin was alive, Red Dragon City would be invulnerable even if there were no walls. Additionally, if Jilin didn't agree, no human army could pass through the volcano and come to Red Dragon City to attack this fake city gate. In short, the city gate couldn't be opened now. If they wanted to walk across the city wall, they could only use the elevator newly developed by the dwarves without using the secret passage or the teleportation circle. The reason why Bane waved his hand above was to ask the dwarves above to lower the elevators hanging outside the city wall. The dwarves glanced at Bane and lowered an elevator hanging on the city wall. This was a new thing that the dwarves had come up with in the past 20 years. The structure of this thing was very simple, but the operation was very complicated. It required dazzling operation instructions to start working. However, this thing only had one function, which was to lower the basket-like elevator automatically and pull it up again. In fact, there was nothing much to design. If one didn't care about strength, one person, one pulley, and one rope could achieve the same effect. They just had to pull things up. However, the dwarves had to design it this way. They thought that this way, Red Dragon City would be impregnable. In fact, when the dwarves made this decision, they asked Bane, who was a human. Bane felt that it was really unnecessary, but he couldn't deny it. After all, he also knew that the dwarves had nothing to do. Bane chatted briefly with the dwarves on the city wall, then took the elevator inside and went down the city wall, entering Red Dragon City. Bane was all too familiar with this place. There were 23 floors under Red Dragon City, and it was really too time-consuming to walk through each floor. Thus, Bane came to the largest crater of the volcano. This was the only passage through all 23 floors in Red Dragon City. It was very deep and wide, like a natural chasm in the eyes of humans, and there was a faint red light shining below. It looked like the entrance to hell. Bane walked to the edge of the cliff and jumped without hesitation. Even if a Type 9 powerhouse were to see this, they would be astonished. Because the cliff was really too high, not to mention that Bane was now a powerhouse at the peak of the 7th step, even a powerhouse of the 9th step would inevitably end up with a broken body if he jumped directly from here. Of course, Bane didn't plan to directly land on the ground. Just as Bane was about to land, Bane raised his hand and gestured a few times in the air, and then a purple light flashed in his eyes. His falling speed suddenly decreased, and then he completely stopped falling. He just floated in the air like that. Witch magic, levitation spell. Bane was already very close to the ground, and with another stroke of 2 fingers, he stood firmly on the ground in the deepest part of Red Dragon City. Bane raised his head, and in front of him was a mountain of gold. Bane walked to the side of the mountain and bent down to pick up a gold coin. Then Bane stood there, stunned for 3 to 4 seconds. Put it down. As expected, a voice that was completely within Bane's expectations sounded. Bane let go, and the gold coin fell back into the mountain of gold. Are you able to detect every piece of gold here when someone touches it? Bane turned around and asked Jilin behind him. For some reason, Jilin was now in human form, with a head of red hair that was very dazzling. Nonsense. Jilin rolled his eyes at Bane. You didn't do anything proper these years, and only learned some fancy tricks. Bane knew that Jilin was talking about his use of levitation spell, as well as his failure to reach the 9th step. Bane didn't find it strange that Jilin could detect his use of levitation spell. He couldn't have hidden from Jilin and quietly entered Red Dragon City. Aisha's magic is really useful. I have to say, witches are actually the most practical people in this world. Bane sat down on Jilin's gold. Can't you sit for a while? Jilin raised his eyebrows, but didn't say anything in the end. The 3rd prince is determined to kill you. Bane suddenly said. Is that so? Jilin didn't think so. There are many people who want to kill me. But in terms of the probability of success, if those people who want to kill you have to line up, the 3rd prince should be the first. If others want to kill me, they at least have a blood feud with me, so I can understand. But why does he want to kill me? I even helped him become the emperor. That's because you want the imperial seal. Besides, how can there be no feud? Didn't you kill the 3rd prince's 7th brother? Who? You forgot? Jilin thought seriously for a while, then showed a confused expression, and shook his head. The 3rd prince's 7th brother? I don't remember. Then the 3rd prince can kill you, so you won't be wronged. Chapter 505. Li Wuyo, who was just in his early 20s, would never have imagined that 2 days ago, Bane, who had a face of "For the sake of the world and the righteousness of our race, I will reluctantly agree to your request," would so decisively sell out the 3rd prince 2 days later. But fortunately, Jilin was no longer the same as before. As the human saying goes, when you have too many debts, you don't have to worry. When you have too many lice, you don't have to bite. Jilin now also knew that the number of people who wanted to kill him was probably as many as the snowflakes in the ice field. Even if he was as powerful as he was, it was unrealistic to kill all of them. Therefore, Jilin now didn't care about the fact that someone wanted to kill him. He didn't fly into a rage after learning about this and directly kill the 3rd prince. Instead, he interestedly discussed the motive of the 3rd prince to kill him with Bane. As for who the 7th brother of the 3rd prince was, he really couldn't remember. The third prince's seventh brother, that's him. Bane began to gesticulate with Jilin. The Middle Empire is still saying what the seventh princes did at that time. He was hit by a fireball from the sky. Not only the seventh princes, but also more than 1,000 Middle Empire soldiers on the mountain and a mountain were all turned into ashes. You didn't do this? Jilin thought for a while. He had an impression of it. Forget it, it's not important. Jilin just thought of this and gave up. Tell me what you mean. Jilin suddenly put away his joking expression as he looked at Bane and asked seriously. He knew that since Bane chose to tell him this at this time, it meant that he wanted to do something. Bane didn't continue Jilin's words. Instead, he put down the bag on his back, opened the bag's pocket, and poured the contents of the bag on Jilin's golden mountain. There was no abrupt change. The things in the bag blended perfectly with the gold mountain. Because the bag was filled with gold. Looking at the bag of gold being poured into the golden mountain, Jilin actually saw a kind of beauty. It was like a river flowing into the sea or a bird returning to the forest. It was natural and reasonable. I heard that you went up at dawn a few days ago? Bane looked at Jilin and asked. Jilin, who was still admiring the new gold, did not realize what Zhang Heng had just said. It took him 2 to 3 seconds to come back to his senses. Yes, there is such a thing. How did you know? At this moment, Jilin suddenly became very honest. In other words, his brain was no longer capable of organizing words. Bane didn't really understand Jilin's state. According to human logic, a person who was extremely wealthy wouldn't care too much about small amounts of money. Just like a person who owned an entire forest, he wouldn't care why there was a tree in the forest today. Then a person like Jilin, who owned several gold mountains, wouldn't care about a bag of gold either. But that was only what people thought. Bane knew that it wasn't the case. Although Jilin owned several gold mountains, even if it was just a gold coin, he would still value it, let alone a bag of gold. Jilin valued it very much. Although I'm not in Red Dragon City, Xiao He is, Bane said. Oh, Jilin replied. Jilin knew who Xiao He was. She was the crow that Aisha summoned with Bane's hair. Now this bird was very powerful. It stood on Aisha's shoulder all day long and didn't fly. Because the dwarves always looked at the sky, wanting to use their creations to shoot something down. If a crow flew across the sky, the dwarves would definitely try to shoot it down. But it seemed that Bane and Aisha could share the bird's vision. So Bane also knew about what happened in Red Dragon City. What did you do on the moon? Bane asked. Nothing. Jilin said casually. The Water Dragon King told me that the moon hid the ultimate weapon of the ancient humans. I wanted to see if it could still be used. What ultimate weapon of the ancient humans? Is it worth your attention? Bane asked curiously. Weren't the ancient humans' weapons all stones and wooden sticks? The ancient humans I'm talking about are a few thousand years older than the ancient humans you're talking about, Jilin said. And the weapon is indeed powerful. Oh? It was rare for Jilin to say something like that. Usually, Jilin's attitude was that the dragons were the strongest in the world, followed by the Protoss, and the rest were not worth mentioning. But today, Jilin praised the weapons of the ancient humans, which was rare. The annihilation bomb, Jilin said. This? Bane was a little hesitant. I know that humans like to exaggerate, but this time, it's not the case. But this time, it really wasn't. That thing could really destroy the world. If a few of them explode together, it can even kill a god. Ben was silent for a moment, then he swallowed a mouthful of saliva. Are you serious? Why would I lie to you? That's true. Bane thought to himself. He did not have the value of being lied to by Jilin. So you went up this time? Bane pointed to the sky. I didn't find it. Jilin was still looking at his new pile of gold. Those humans hid the annihilation bomb very well. I couldn't find it. If I found it, I would have sunk the Elven Island. I don't know how they hid it. That does sound powerful. Bane nodded. What's on the moon? Is there a moon god's palace? There's nothing there other than silver-white soil. Jilin shook his head. I flew 5 rounds on the moon. Bane was upset. How could there be no moon god's palace? But now he finally knew why the third prince went to the moon. The third prince also went to the moon a few days ago, Bane said. This time, Jilin was silent for a long time. He's much worse than you, Bane said. He didn't even go to the moon. Jilin looked at Bane. This was the first time he looked away from the gold. The third prince tried to go to the moon, but he failed. He fell and the third prince was seriously injured. He's still unconscious. Jilin still didn't say anything. He was probably thinking about something. Bane knew that this might be because Jilin felt threatened by humans for the first time. And this would greatly change Jilin's attitude toward humans. Jilin, do you know about the Sunstone? Bane asked. Jilin was stunned, then he shook his head. It's a gem from the Dwarf King's treasury. He used 2 pieces to make your dragon scale sword. You remember it well, Jilin said. The third prince failed to go to the moon, but the Iron Blood King thinks that if he has the Sunstone, the third prince might succeed. The gold I brought this time was used by the third prince to buy the Sunstone. Do you think I should sell the Sunstone to the third prince? No. Bane shook his head first, then looked at Jilin and said seriously, the main thing is that we also need something like the Annihilation Bomb. What do you think? Jilin lowered his head and thought for a moment. Then bring the Sunstone to the third prince. Bane smiled. This answer was within his expectations. He had told Li Wuyu before that he and Jilin were more like-minded than ever. Chapter 506. No one knew what kind of consideration Jilin went through to give the Sunstone to Bane so easily. Bane didn't know either. But what Bane knew was that he should never try to guess Jilin's thoughts from a human's point of view. Because it was destined to be futile. Maybe he had some deep schemes, or maybe he just didn't want it anymore. The third prince wants to go to the moon. Using the Sunstone seems to be to resist the low temperature in sky beyond sky. Jilin looked at Bane and said, but the Sunstone doesn't seem to have such a function. Oh? Bane was stunned, but this is what the Iron Blood King said. Do you remember the Iron Blood King? The one who never speaks more than 6 words, the Emperor of the Snow Wind Empire. I remember. Jilin said, but the Dwarf King once told me that the Sunstone is only available to the dwarf race. So what? Bane thought to himself, isn't this a very obvious question? If that thing isn't unique to the dwarf race, why would the Middle Empire let a princess like Li Wuyu steal it from you? So, the Iron Blood King shouldn't have seen the Sunstone, nor has he been to sky beyond sky. Jilin said, in other words, his opinion isn't worth believing. Bane felt that something was wrong, but he couldn't put his finger on it. Instead, he felt that what Jilin said was very reasonable. Then what do you mean? Bane blinked. Jilin took out a red diamond-shaped stone from somewhere behind him and handed it to Bane. The stone was obviously not an ordinary item because it shone with a sun-like radiance. Although it was weak, it was genuine. This is? Go and tell them that this is the Sunstone. Isn't this? Bane said. When Jilin took out this stone, he thought from the bottom of his heart that this was the Sunstone. He could tell at a glance that it was, this is. Jilin placed the Sunstone in Bane's hand. If the third prince has any difficulties, feel free to look for me. Bane looked at Jilin and blinked 6 times in a second. Bane had never seen such an attitude from Jilin, which made his hair stand on end. It felt like a tiger was smiling kindly at you. You don't dare to act rashly and can only smile. But you clearly know that you are in deep trouble. You want to scheme against the third prince. Bane looked at Jilin and said seriously. Isn't that what you were thinking too? Jilin said. If you hadn't schemed against him, would you have come over and asked me for the Sunstone? Bane was silent for a few seconds. How feasible is the Demon King's idea? I don't know. I've never tried it, Jilin answered straightforwardly. Then, what about Aisha's idea? Bane asked again. It should be, very likely. Jilin paused for a moment and said slowly. You haven't given up yet? You gave up quite quickly back then. Why are you repeating it now? Well, I can't accept it. The heavens are unfair, there's no such thing as the heavens. Jilin sneered. Bane froze for a moment and nodded. That's true. Go, Jilin said. Jilin. If you really want to sacrifice millions of people, then stop. That doesn't meet her expectations. I have my own considerations. For some reason, Bane actually laughed when he heard Jilin's serious and deep words. What are you laughing at? Jilin asked. Nothing. I just feel that you've matured a lot. Jilin was already several hundred years old. Although he spent most of his time sleeping, being called mature by a human in his early 20s was still beyond his psychological tolerance. Jilin grimaced in anger. But fortunately, it was Bane. After saying that, he turned into a shadow and ran away. When Bane gave the Sun Stone to Li Wuyo in the grasslands outside Qingming City, Li Wuyo was extremely excited. He almost jumped up and down a few times like a young girl. Bane and Royally watched as Li Wuyo flew into the golden airship to pick up the princess. Then the airship took off and slowly disappeared into the eastern sky. Father. Royally stood in the lush green grass and watched the breeze caress the grass. The grass was so green that it looked like it could drip water. The sky was blue and the clouds were white. The breeze was just right. Bane responded. That stone was really sold to you by Uncle Long? Of course. Otherwise, would he really steal it? Who would steal from him? Then, how much was the sunstone sold for? A bag of gold. Uncle Long made a profit? He probably made a killing. Would they dare to use something bought from the Red Disaster? They wouldn't dare. Bane was certain. They'll check it over and over again, but they won't find any problems. They won't be completely assured, but they'll be forced to use it. Father, our family, is on Uncle Long's side? No. Bane said. Oh. Royally sighed in relief. But then he heard Bane say, our family is on Holy Queen Stya's side. Royally was stunned. Isn't Holy Queen, yes. Bane nodded slowly. Then, you and Uncle Long, work together. Guess. Royally was dumbfounded. He stood there, not daring to move. He thought to himself that he was really his father's son. How could he tell him such things? Then what do we do now? Royally asked carefully. Go home for dinner. Okay, father. You haven't been home for a few days. How are you going to explain it to my mother when you get home? Visiting a friend. Father, aren't you underestimating my mother? I wouldn't dare to. Then your explanation is too perfunctory. It's enough. Bane smiled. Because a friend gave her a small gift. As Bane spoke, he took out a red gem from his pocket. It was crystal clear and glowed. It was the size of 2 thumbs. Royally's eyes widened. If that's the case, then it's enough. Father, you're amazing. Hearing his son's praise, Bane couldn't help but get carried away. He smiled and said to his son, Royally, you have to remember, all women in the world, regardless of age, can't be underestimated. Yes. Royally nodded. He felt that his father's words were true. And as if to prove Bane's words. On the golden spaceship flying among the clouds, Li Wuyo was holding the glowing stone, turning it over and over to study it. She looked very carefully. Her brows were tightly furrowed and her expression was serious. She didn't have the naive look she had when she said goodbye to Bane. Li Wuyo looked for a long time and suddenly said softly. Behind her, where there was no one, the space suddenly twisted. Then, a figure quietly appeared. Your Highness, the old minister is here. It turned out that Li Wuyo's trip to the Saimai Empire had been followed by a legendary figure. Chapter 507. Li Wuyo had met countless people along the way from the Middle Empire to Red Dragon City. However, no one realized that such a harmless-looking little girl was actually followed by a legendary powerhouse. Your Highness. Ingyi appeared behind Li Wuyo and bowed his head. Grandpa Ingyi, take a look at this. Li Wuyo handed the diamond-shaped red stone to Ingyi. Congratulations, Your Highness. You found the Sun Stone for His Majesty. Ingyi looked at it for a while and returned it to Li Wuyo. Grandpa Ingyi, how do you know this is the Sun Stone? Li Wuyo frowned and asked curiously. There's a book in our country called the Golden Stone Record. Have you heard of it? Li Wuyo shook her head. Like the third prince, she didn't like to read since she was young. However, she was loved by the Sword Saint, so few people could control her. She had never heard of the Golden Stone Record. Ingyi's mouth, which was hidden behind the mask, seemed to be smiling. Obviously, he was also aware of this situation. According to the Golden Stone Record, the Sun Stone is a stone that condenses the light of the sun. It's red and the light condenses on the surface. It's indestructible and warm. This stone matches the description in the Golden Stone Record. Li Wuyo was silent for a while and didn't say anything. The people of the Central Empire always had a deep trust in the so-called ancient books and ancient books. Grandpa Ingyi, why did you come to the Saimai Empire this time? Li Wuyo suddenly asked. Your Highness, this journey will be long and fraught with dangers. This old subject is here to protect Your Highness. Grandpa Ingyi, are you bullying me because I'm young? Li Wuyo smiled and said coquettishly. Old minister wouldn't dare. Even Grandpa Ingyi can't enter Red Dragon City. So, if you just want to escort me to the outskirts of Red Dragon City, you don't have to be there. Even the fourth shadow and the fifth shadow can do it. If that's the case, why did you, the most loyal legendary figure, come to the capital when Father was unconscious? With Lord Sword Saint here, he will naturally be able to protect His Majesty and Her Majesty. Why did Mother ask you to come to the sacred city? Imperial Mother, are you going to do both at once? Your Highness, please stop guessing. Ingyi's words were equivalent to acquiescing to Li Wuyo's statement, but it also made his attitude clear. Li Wuyo knew that no matter how he asked, he would not get any results, so he asked, Grandpa Ingyi, what do you think of Uncle Bane? Yes, I haven't seen you for many years. You've indeed improved a lot. If you'd been more careful in your cultivation, I'm afraid you would have discovered me within 200 meters. His talent was so high, yet he wasted it. Ingyi shook his head slightly as he spoke. It looked like he really hated him for not fighting for it. It was as if Bola had seen with his own eyes the disgrace of a fine steed in the hands of a slave, and died in a ditch. I mean, will Uncle Bane really stand on our side? Shadow 1 hesitated. As a legend rank expert, Ingyi's vision and knowledge were naturally outstanding. He could see through ordinary people with just a few glances. But Bane. He had to admit that he had misjudged this young man. When he first saw Bane in the Middle Empire, Bane was still so innocent that he could make people feel the vitality of the world. He was so innocent that he looked like a fool. But later, he went to the Divine Dragon Empire and became a shadow in the Divine Dragon Empire's swamp. Many of the things he did were unthinkable. The most outrageous thing was when Bane transferred 2 flying dragons away from Calm Wind Pass during the rising tide. He seemed to view countless human lives as something that could be sacrificed. Your Highness, this person is neither good nor evil. It's hard to judge, but one thing is for sure, this person is very dangerous. Very dangerous. For a legend rank assassin to say that this person was very dangerous, even Bane would feel honored to hear this. Red Dragon City. Jilin sat on the Golden Mountain in a daze, staring at the churning lava lake. What are you thinking about? Jilin looked back at Aisha and smiled. Are you done? That's right. Aisha let out a long sigh and stretched her body. What did those fellows say? Nothing. They were all bored and looking for trouble. They want to fight humans again? Yes. Otherwise, why would they be so bored? They were really bullied back then. They always want to take revenge, Jilin lamented. You still haven't given up on her matter? Aisha suddenly asked. This change in topic was very stiff. There was no foreshadowing, as if it was a cliff. It seemed that Aisha was tired of beating around the bush. Tisk, I'll give it a try. Maybe I don't need to kill millions of people, Jilin said. Why are you doing this? Aisha asked with a frown. Isn't this obvious enough? As a dragon, you have the endless knowledge of the dragon bloodline. I don't believe that you can't see through the life and death of a human. Jilin was silent for 2 seconds before sighing. He looked at the wall reddened by the lava and said, For a dragon, I'm still too young. This is normal. Understood, Aisha said. At night, in Bane's home. Dinner was already over. Bane was half lying on the roof of his dry straw hut, holding a dirty, muddy wine jug in his hand. He looked at the sky and drank wine under the moonlight. Bane looked at the moon for a while before taking a sip of wine. Not long after, Royally climbed up and walked to Bane's side. When did you buy wine? Royally asked curiously. I remember that you rarely drink wine. You don't have any at home, and I didn't see you buy it on the way. I didn't buy it, Bane said. It's a gift from a friend when you were born. It's been buried underground for more than 20 years. Your friend? What kind of friend? Is it a human? Heh. Bane smiled but didn't say anything. Father, what kind of person is the Golden King of the Middle Empire? Royally suddenly asked. Bane hesitated. He's not a good person, but he's a likable guy. Then what about the Holy Queen? Bane sighed. She's really an impeccable person. She's like the embodiment of light. She's transparent, pure, and full of justice. I once thought that if there was one person who could lead all humans, it would be her. But she's dead. Yes. That's why the heavens are unfair. Then you want to go against the heavens? Bane paused, then looked at the sky and cursed. You're right. Is there a chance of winning? If it's just me, of course not. But if there's Jilin, then there's a chance of winning. But the Golden King doesn't agree? Yes. Bane let out a deep sigh. He casually placed the empty flask beside him and turned over to go back to sleep. Royally looked at the wine jug. There was a seal on it. It looked like the seal was of excellent quality. Even though it was buried underground for 20 years, the words were still clearly visible. Liu of the Middle Empire. Congratulations to Brother Bei for having a son. Chapter 508. Liu of the Middle Empire, congratulations on the birth of your son, Brother Bei. The seal was not big, and these few words were already full. The handwriting on it was flamboyant and looked very free and easy. The person who wrote this must have either never practiced calligraphy or was an extremely free and easy person. Liu. This was a familiar yet strange name. Because everyone knew that the name of the Emperor of the Middle Empire was Liu, but few people mentioned it. No one would easily call the Emperor by his name. Perhaps even the Golden King himself rarely had the chance to use his name. Because the Emperor never represented himself. His every word and action represented his country. And the seal on this wine jar had the name of the Golden King written on it. Royally picked up the wine jar, intending to wipe it clean and put it away. This thing might represent his father's untraceable past. The world changed, and the sea turned into mulberry fields. The past became the wind, drifting far away and untraceable. When the youth grew old, he was like a different person. It was all time, and time could change everything. The Middle Empire. Half a month had passed. The third prince had already been able to move normally with the help of the Emperor's power, and even began to deal with the affairs of the Middle Empire. And today was the day of the experiment of the Sun Emperor's throne. Yes, because it was a throne with the Sun Stone, the team brought by the Iron Blood King named it Sun Emperor's Throne. It was very in line with the characteristics of the Snow Wind Empire, simple and crude, and obvious at a glance. The throne, which was twice the size of a person, was now standing in the middle of the square of the Middle Empire's palace. It didn't look any different from before. Only in the middle of the throne's chest, there was a red diamond-shaped stone. It shone with the brilliance of the sun. The third prince wore a golden dragon robe, hugged his shoulders, and walked around the throne twice. Then he looked at the people of the Snow Wind Empire and said with slight disdain, "That's it? And this is all you've done in half a month? Does Aisha just have to put the stone on her chest?" "Your Majesty, Golden King, on the surface, that might be the case," a technician on the throne of the human sovereign said. "What about in reality?" "In reality, it means the rearrangement of countless formations." This was a massive project. The throne of the human emperor was the pinnacle of human technology. Even the slightest changes must be made with extreme caution. "When will it take off?" the third prince asked. "Now. We'll begin the second moon god project tonight," the third prince said. Night fell. Lights once again lit up the night sky of the Middle Empire. The moon hung high in the sky. Today's night sky was exceptionally clear and cloudless. Every star shone brightly in the night sky. "Congratulations, Your Majesty. The heavens are working in your favor." Ouyang-ju walked beside the third prince and said loudly, "Your Majesty has the help of heaven. I think you will succeed." The third prince actually didn't want Ouyang-ju to come. He was too old and had to be supported by him when he walked. "It's just a sunny day." The third prince helped Ouyang-ju to the front row of the crowd. He asked someone to bring a seat for Ouyang-ju and helped Ouyang-ju sit down. "Sigh, even so, it's always good to say a few auspicious words before you leave." Ouyang-ju pulled the third prince's sleeve and patted the third prince's hand. "Teacher is right," the third prince replied. Then, he looked at Li Wuyo, who was behind Ouyang-ju, and said, "Keep an eye on your advisor." "Yes, father," Li Wuyo said. The third prince didn't let Xueqing and Li Wuyo watch before he left. He said that they could wait for him after he left, but they didn't have to send him off. Because this wasn't a parting of life and death. It was just a risk that no human had ever taken successfully. Ouyang-ju pulled the third prince closer and whispered in his ear, When you come back, you must tell me what the Moon God Palace looks like." Countless generations of literati, great writers, and great grandmasters of the Central Empire have all imagined the scenery of the Moon Palace. The white jade pavilions, the immortal jade rabbits, the crystal-like osmanthus trees, the fairyland. Now, you can see it with your own eyes. "Don't worry." The third prince smiled. Then, the third prince turned around and left. He walked to the throne in the center of the square. The throne of the Sun God Emperor began to transform. It turned into a human-shaped armor and wrapped the third prince in it. The throne of the Sun God Emperor began to slowly rise into the sky under everyone's gaze. The third prince pushed the throne with the power of the Sun God Emperor. There were dozens of energy stones of different sizes in the throne. They were originally used to store the power of the Sun God that the third prince didn't usually use. Once he fought with someone, the third young master would be able to release a strength that would take him several months to achieve with the help of the countless arrays in the throne. The human race originally thought that just this alone was enough to pose a threat to the Red Disaster, but now, they realized that things were far from that simple. Just the increase in numbers wasn't enough to defeat the Red Disaster. The Sun God Emperor still needed a process from a quantitative change to a qualitative change. Therefore, the energy stones that were originally used as weapons became the energy source for the throne. The third prince continued to fly upwards. His originally free flight became heavier and heavier. It was as if something was pressing down on him, preventing him from continuing to fly upwards. But the third prince wasn't flustered at all. Because he had already experienced a similar situation once. He had no distractions. There was only the moon in his eyes. The third prince's flying speed was actually very fast. With the support of the throne, he could now fly from the westernmost to the easternmost of the Middle Empire in a day. He could even take a nap and rest at noon. This kind of speed couldn't be considered slow. However, when the third prince's destination was the stars in the sky, this flying speed wasn't enough. The third prince looked at the moon and felt that he had been flying, but the position of the moon didn't seem to have changed at all. It was as if every time the third prince moved forward, the moon would move back a little. The third prince knew that it was just his illusion because the distance between them was too far. The third prince ran towards the moon, as if he was a man running towards a woman who didn't like him. No matter how I run towards you, you don't look at me. I can't reach you. No matter how hard I try, the distance between us doesn't shrink at all. But fortunately, going to the moon seemed to be easier than falling in love. Because although the distance to the moon was far, there would always be a time when it would be over. As the third prince flew out of the blue sky and entered the dark sky, the third prince heaved a sigh of relief. This was where he failed last time. At that time, it was as if he had crossed a certain line. Extreme cold instantly attacked him. The human emperor's throne was instantly frozen. But fortunately, there was no problem this time. Even here, the third prince still didn't feel any discomfort. Only then did the third prince look down at the red gem on his chest. He felt the warmth that seemed to be everywhere. He thought to himself that this was really the sunstone. Chapter 509. In the universe, the space was dark and deep, and it was absolutely silent. In the endless darkness and loneliness, there seemed to be endless mystery and danger. But it was also possible that there was nothing, no, at least there were those endless stars in the universe. This was the first time the humans in this world had seen the real starry sky with their own eyes. His so-called world was just one of the many stars in the sky. The so-called bright moon was just a speck of dust in this endless world. Until now, the third prince somewhat understood Jilin's attitude of not caring about anything. It was just something that happened between dust-like lives in one of the endless worlds. Unfortunately, he was just one of the countless specks of dust. He would never be able to understand a great life like Brother Long. The third prince shook his head slightly in the solar human emperor's throne. He flew toward the moon that seemed to be close at hand. The third prince did not know how long he had been flying. He only felt that he had been moving forward in the endless darkness. Even though his rationality told him that not much time had passed, he felt like an endless amount of time had passed. Finally, the third prince landed on the surface of the moon wearing the solar human emperor's throne. There were only two colors on the entire moon, the silver gray of the moon and the black of the universe. There were no jade rabbits, crystal-like osmanthus trees, or white jade-like palaces here. All that was left were incomparably huge pits. At a glance, the end of the world could be seen. It was barren. However, the Iron Blood King's information could not be wrong, the legacy left by the ancient humans to the human race. The third prince rolled his eyes and had a guess in his heart. The third prince moved his mind slightly, and countless light spots appeared around him. The Great Wide World 4 Holy Formation. The golden light spots that represented the Great Wide World became even brighter at this time, as if those light spots could really borrow the power of the stars. The stars began to move and arrange themselves. Gradually, an extremely mysterious aura appeared on the moon. The azure dragon, white tiger, vermilion bird, and black tortoise appeared at the same time. Back when the third prince fought with the Demon King on Holy Maiden Peak, there was no such scene. At that time, only the 4 sacred beasts appeared one by one. The 4 sacred beasts sat around the third prince and roared towards the sky. A wave of majestic human sovereign chi spread out like the sea. Gradually, the power of Renhuang spread to the entire moon. I command in the name of the human sovereign. Everything that belongs to the human race will appear. The third prince's voice, enhanced by the power of the human emperor, became extremely loud, like the bell in a temple. It echoed above the moon. Following that, illusory images of palaces and pavilions that were as white as jade began to appear on the moon. It was like a mirage in the desert. However, this mirage was definitely not an illusion. Because it was slowly materializing. The originally transparent and illusory color became darker and darker. Gradually, a white jade-colored palace appeared in front of the third young master. No, it was not appropriate to call it a palace. It was a palace complex. At the center of this group of palaces was the tallest building. It was a lofty pavilion with more than 20 floors. At this moment, even the third prince himself was shocked. Ancient humans could actually do such a thing? At this moment, the third prince wished that someone could witness this magnificent scene with him. Today, the third prince's words could be said to be the law. Everything went according to his wishes. As soon as the third prince had this thought, he heard a voice behind him. Oh, not bad. What humans feared the most was not demons or ghosts, nor was it the unfathomable human heart. After all, what humans feared the most was the word accident. Humans were creatures with strong adaptability. No matter how big or terrifying something was, as long as humans expected it, they could accept it. For example, death. However, what humans feared the most was that something that they thought was impossible happened. It was like going to a confined space alone. You were sure that there was no one else but you. But after you stayed for a while, a hand suddenly patted you on the shoulder. You must have been scared out of your wits. The third prince was the same at this moment. No one would have thought that someone would talk to him on the moon. Who is it? The third prince roared and suddenly turned around. Then, the third prince froze on the spot. Because behind him was a red megalosaurus. The dragon's head was very close to the third prince. The third prince could even see his own reflection in the golden eyeball. Why are you here? The third prince's eyes were as wide as copper bells. It was as if his eyes would fly out of their sockets if he did not pay attention. But after the third prince instinctively shouted this sentence, he understood the ins and outs of the matter in a flash. He had been tricked by Jilin. The third prince's behavior was dissolute when he was young, and the ministers and nobles of the Middle Empire had many complaints about him. But they had all expressed the view that it was a pity that he was an unpolished gem. In other words, they all thought that the third prince was an unpolished gem that had not been polished. In the eyes of those people, he was extremely talented. To put it simply, the third prince had always been very intelligent. Jilin looked at the third prince's solar emperor throne. He did not use the ability of the golden eyes, so he could not see the expression on the third prince's face at that moment. He could only see that the third prince seemed to be very excited from the slight trembling of the solar emperor throne. Are you saying something? Jilin said, there's no air here. I can't hear you if you speak in a normal way. The third prince paused for a moment. Then, like the human emperor's edict just now, the third prince's bell-like voice sounded. Why are you here? The third prince used the power of the human emperor to transmit his voice on the moon. Heh. Jilin chuckled and did not answer. As the first human to see Outland, the third prince, how do you feel? This time, it was the third prince's turn to be silent. When you and I met more than 20 years ago, I never thought that we would meet here today, Jilin said. The third prince sighed. Brother Long's imitation of the Middle Empire's way of speaking is getting more and more authentic. But isn't what Brother Long said nonsense? I'd be a fool if I thought of it. How would I know that I could go to the moon? The third prince was certain that there was no one else here apart from the two of them. He immediately exposed his nature that had been suppressed for many years. Is this the creation of humans on the moon? Jilin said, I couldn't find it even after searching for a few rounds. The third prince was silent for a moment. How did you know? There are many secrets that are only known to old creatures, Jilin said casually. He was carefully examining the palace that looked like white jade on the moon. So the legends of humans are starting to be reliable, right? Jilin said. That's not right, the third prince said, that's just something we imitated based on the legends. The third prince looked at the highest point of the palace and said slowly. The lofty tower was huge and tall. There were faint streams of light in the color of jade. On the highest pavilion, there was a huge jade token with 3 words written on it. White Jade Capital. Chapter 510. White jade capital. Jilin also recognized the three ancient words as he read them out softly. That's right. The third prince's voice sounded amused. White jade capital is probably one of the greatest romances in human imagination. A pure white palace on the moon where the moon goddess lives. It's pure and flawless. However, humans have hidden a terrifying weapon inside. Indeed, beautiful and illusory things are always filled with danger. Are you here to snatch the annihilation bomb? The third prince looked at Jilin as he spoke. Are you here to kill me with the annihilation bomb? Jilin also looked at the third prince's throne. The atmosphere between the man and dragon suddenly changed as it instantly became tense. It was as though the originally soft tendon of a cow had been stretched into a bowstring. I'm not here to kill. I'm just here to intimidate, the third prince said in a deep voice. You mean to say that you are here to scare me? Jilin asked. Brother Long, whether humans can live or not is not something that can be decided by you. The third prince's voice resounded through the entire moon. His voice was like the voice of the heavenly Tao. His words could determine the order of the world. If an ordinary person were to hear it, the third prince's voice would naturally sound like that of a god. However, to Jilin, it was just a facade. In a situation where there was no air as a medium, sound could not be transmitted. Jilin did not need to make his voice loud enough for the third prince to hear him clearly. It was obvious who was stronger and who was weaker. You are too unrestrained. This world can't tolerate a free creature like you. The third prince bellowed in a deep voice. You can do whatever you want. If you are in a good mood, you can protect thousands of humans. If you are in a bad mood, you can make countless lives vanish. No one can stop you. You are too powerful, too free, too unrestrained. Is it wrong to live freely? Jilin asked with a frown. He was puzzled by the third prince's logic. Wasn't freedom the ultimate dream of all creatures? Yes. The third prince said, all creatures in this world live in a framework. What kind of framework do people live in? Jilin asked. Morality and law, the third prince answered without hesitation. Moral law? Jilin chuckled. Who set this framework? Heavens. The third prince said. No, no. Jilin shook his head repeatedly. Geniuses don't have the time to order such things for you. These things are set by you, the people who stand at the top of your race. The purpose of these things was to maintain the so-called stability. Human society was like a pyramid. There were more people at the bottom and fewer people at the top. The people at the top were standing on the people at the bottom, which was why they stood higher. The morals and laws you speak of are just cement that stabilizes the pyramid. In order for people like you to stand more firmly on top of everyone's heads. The third prince was so angry that his face turned white. He had been an emperor for more than 20 years. Not to mention that he was an emperor for all eternity. Although he wasn't an emperor, he could be said to be diligent and considerate of the people. Even for things like managing the Luo River, the third prince couldn't bear to waste the people's money. He personally lowered the riverbed and changed the river's course. But in Jilin's words, he became a fatuous emperor who took advantage of the people. This was clearly a shameless and unreasonable act. Brother Long. You. Why do you say that? As the third young master spoke, the roots of his teeth were trembling with anger. Everything I do is to protect the people of the human race. Then why do you use such a framework for them? For the stability of the empire. What's the use? It can make the country prosper and the people live in peace. What's the use? Their entire lives are dedicated to you. No, they are dedicated to the empire. Are they willing? The third prince was silent for a moment. There's no better way than this. For what? Jilin paused for a moment and said, for what reason would humans with godlike wisdom give up godlike freedom? For survival. The third prince roared. Humans are different from you. You can live a carefree life on your own. You can go to the sky or the ground, go to the moon if you want to. No matter how big a natural disaster is, it's just a light breeze and a drizzle in your eyes. But humans aren't like that. This world is too dangerous and cruel for humans. Humans can only survive by huddling together. Only by huddling together can humans stand tall and face the world with an indomitable spirit. If it was just a single human living in the forest, even if they didn't have to worry about food and clothing, you couldn't be sure if they could live past tomorrow. Because in this world, it was too easy for fragile humans to die. A slightly bigger rock or a slightly deeper hole could cause a human to die without a trace. Thus, humans in the past understood their own fragility. They united, formed tribes, built villages, and resisted the dangers of wild beasts in nature. Then the population multiplied, the tribes became stronger, and the villages expanded. Thus, the empire was formed. This is a stable cycle. The people work hard to provide for the empire, and the empire protects the people. Jilin looked at the third prince, licked his lips and asked, "Then what's the use of people like you in this cycle?" To protect the stability of the cycle. To protect the stability of the empire, to protect many people, and not to die an unnatural death. The third prince said. And Brother Long, your existence threatens this cycle. No, you threaten the existence of humans. So you want to take the world annihilation bomb? Brother Long, you know, I never thought of killing you. That's not worth the loss. This is only a deterrent. It can also make humans feel at ease. It can let them know that even if the enemy is a disaster like you, Brother Long, the Empire can still protect them. Jilin thought seriously for a while, then shook his head. No. No matter what you say, I can't let a weapon that can threaten me fall into your hands. Although I have confidence in you, I don't have confidence in your descendants. Moreover, I'm not a weak human. Why should I give up my freedom to make you feel at ease? I can kill people if I want to. Brother Long. The sacred beast beside the third prince suddenly lit up. Don't force me. You think you can beat me in a one-on-one fight? Jilin also spread his wings, baring his fangs and brandishing his claws. He seemed to be ready to take down the third prince in one blow. This is the White Jade Jing. The third young master said, in the territory of the human race, I'm not alone and helpless. Moreover, this is White Jade Capital. I know this is White Jade Capital. Do I need you to tell me twice? Jilin tilted his head. So what if it's White Jade Capital? Brother Long, when I summoned White Jade Capital in the name of the human emperor, I became the master of White Jade Capital. I already know all the secrets here. Oh? It seems that this city has given you quite a lot of confidence. White Jade Capital is an immortal city built by the ancient humans with all their might. It's naturally extraordinary. There are 3,000 flying swords here, and 5 million hidden soldiers. As the third prince finished speaking, countless flying swords flew out of the houses and windows of White Jade Capital. They flew into the sky and circled around the tallest pavilion. Countless white jade-like houses opened up, and countless soldiers poured out. They came out of the houses and gathered on the road. They wore armor, held long halberds, and carried bows and arrows. Everything, including the soldiers' bodies, seemed to be carved from jade. The third prince stood in front of the army. Behind him was the pavilion of White Jade Capital. Countless flying swords flew above the pavilion like streams of light. The third prince looked at Jilin and said loudly, Brother Long, look. This is the foundation of the human race. Chapter 5:11. Tisk, tsk, tisk. Jilin couldn't help but click his tongue as he looked at the inexplicably huge army in front of him. He thought to himself that it was really unnecessary for him to pick a fight with the third prince, the human emperor. He didn't seem to have the habit of fighting alone. Even in this place, he could summon an army of 1,000,000. You don't seem to have 5,000,000. Jilin said as he looked at the army behind the third prince. Jilin had also seen a dragon fight with 1,000,000 people, so he knew how magnificent it was when 1,000,000 people stood together. In the battle between the Beastmen and the Nanshin Empire, the ground was covered with people. Not to mention when the third prince led the four-nation coalition to suppress the Red Dragon Palace, there was no end to the number of heads. It's just a saying. The third prince didn't expect Jilin to be so serious with him at this time. These people don't seem to be enough, right? Jilin's teeth spat out a few flames. It had to be said that what Jilin said was also the third prince's sore spot. When he was on the ground, he could mobilize countless troops, 1,000,000 people. But they couldn't cross the volcanic moat. Although there were countless people, they couldn't touch Jilin at all. Now it was different. Jilin was far away from the volcano. This time, the people behind the third prince could finally reach him. For the first time, the human race's human wave tactic could be used against Jilin. Unfortunately, there weren't enough people. Although these soldiers aren't enough to face Brother Long, it's still worth a try. Sigh. Jilin sighed. How did I offend you? No, Brother Long treated me well. Brother Long was the one who helped me obtain the throne. Why would I be dissatisfied with Brother Long? Then why do you always want to hit me? As an emperor, one must always be prepared to face an invasion. The third prince looked at Jilin and said. You? Forget it. Jilin shook his head. I can understand. Thank you. Then, let's cut the crap. Jilin flapped its wings. I only have one question for you. Brother Long, please speak. The third prince's expression also became serious, as if he was a general about to go to war. He knew that the final battle between him and Jilin was about to come. This was the battle of destiny that would determine the fate of mankind for countless years to come. Can you give me the annihilation bomb? Jilin asked. No. The third prince said. I can stay in the volcano for 500 years and never take a step out. During this period, I promise that the myriad spirit nation will never hurt the human race. How about it? I can use my real name to swear. Brother Long, the dead are gone. It's like the water in the sea. Even if you can destroy the world, how can you find it back? The annihilation bomb. I can't give it to you. You've already told me that spilled water can't be recovered. Jilin said. But if Staya dies like this, I'm really unwilling. If you insist, don't blame me for not remembering our old friendship and snatching it. Attack! The third prince shouted. The soldiers that looked like white jade raised their halberds uniformly and attacked the giant Jilin. Only these terracotta soldiers that didn't know fear dared to charge at a monster like Jilin. Under the command of their general, they charged forward without any fear of death. The third young master had read many military books in the past, but none of them had ever mentioned how to use an army of hundreds of thousands to kill a single opponent. With no other choice, the third prince could only leave a few thousand terracotta soldiers to shoot arrows at Jilin to disturb him. The remaining hundreds of thousands of terracotta soldiers didn't have any formation and charged forward like a swarm of bees. They swung forward in a chaotic manner. That was true. Hundreds of thousands of soldiers against one person, what formation was there? The third prince made up his mind. He wanted to use the human wave tactic to drown Jilin. I can't beat you, I'll tire you to death. If a sea of people surged towards you, even if you could topple the mountains and overturn the seas, you wouldn't be able to see the shore. These terracotta soldiers could fly freely in the universe. Even if Jilin flew into the sky, he wouldn't be able to get rid of these terracotta soldiers. Obviously, Jilin didn't want to use that kind of trick to fight against the third prince. Jilin was on the ground. He flapped his wings, swung his tail, waved his claws and bit. Jilin waved his hand and dozens of terracotta soldiers were crushed. With a swing of his tail, hundreds of servants were scattered. These terracotta soldiers were made of very sturdy materials, but to Jilin, they were just slightly harder stones. Their stone arrows covered the sky and rained down like rain. However, when they landed on Jilin's body, they only made a slightly louder sound before falling to the ground. Although their stone halberds were powerful and sharp, they couldn't hurt Jilin's scales. Jilin looked at the third prince behind the endless sea of people. 300,000 against 1. This was an extremely unequal battle. However, he had the advantage. Although the terracotta soldiers were powerful, they couldn't hurt Jilin at all. However, the third prince was also aware of Jilin's strength. He didn't expect these stone men to do anything to the red disaster. These terracotta soldiers were meant to be killed by him. Their goal was to exhaust his mind. In the end, this battle still required him to personally lead the troops and fight it himself. Bang! The Emperor's sword was unsheathed. The 3,000 flying swords in the sky condensed into an extremely sharp sword beam. As the third prince's Emperor's sword swayed slightly, it quietly fell towards Jilin, who was in the midst of a fierce battle. Legend had it that white jade capital could suppress a country. There were 3,000 flying swords hidden in the tallest white jade tower. Each sword could take a person's head from thousands of miles away. However, if one had a disloyal heart, the flying swords would come and the head would fall to the ground. It was unstoppable. However, today, the 3,000 flying swords of white jade capital had all come out. All for the sake of that dragon head. A needle-like sharpness crept into Jilin's heart. Jilin looked up and saw countless flying swords with sword beams flying towards him. A golden light flashed in Jilin's eyes. Dragon's breath. A red beam of light condensed from fire elements shot out from Jilin's mouth and collided with the 3,000 flying swords. Most of the flying swords couldn't block Jilin's dragon's breath and fell halfway. However, the remaining dozens of flying swords actually passed through the dragon's breath. Jilin hurriedly stopped the dragon's breath. With a slight thought, the scales on his wings closed. They became two of the strongest shields in the world. Clang! Clang! Jilin's two wings certainly couldn't protect his whole body. However, his scales were also one of the few strong defenses in the entire universe. Most of the flying swords were bounced off when they touched Jilin's scales. However, there were 5 or 6 flying swords whose sword tips were shallowly inserted into Jilin's body. They didn't fall to the ground. Although they stabbed so shallowly, they might even be stuck between Jilin's scales. They couldn't even pierce through Jilin's skin. However, the third prince could at least proudly say that he had stabbed Jilin 5 or 6 times. Roar! Jilin suddenly let out a roar. The hundreds of terracotta figures around were blown off their feet. Because those flying swords had actually hurt him, although it wasn't deep. However, this meant that a true battle between gods was about to begin. Chapter 5:12. The night sky wasn't completely clear today, but many people were looking up. Because the sky was full of dark clouds, not a single star could be seen. Only the area around the moon was shockingly clear. It was as if a part of the sky that was full of clouds had leaked out, revealing the moon. It was also as if the moon had dispersed the surrounding fog. Everyone was looking at this strange scene seriously. Suddenly, a ray of green light appeared on the moon. Everyone was shocked, thinking that it was the manifestation of the gods and that they were lucky enough to witness a miracle. They almost wanted to kneel down and worship it. But then, a flame-like red light spewed out from the moon. In an instant, the red light eliminated the green light. Only then did people realize that there might be a god subduing demons on the moon. It turned out that the green light just now wasn't a god, but a demon. Because they saw that the green light was obviously dispersed by the red light. Gods, on the other hand, had supreme power and would never be at a disadvantage. What they didn't know was that the green light was His Majesty, the Emperor, who was fighting for them. They thought that the red light of the gods was the red disaster that killed people like flies. A child from the imperial astronomer of the Middle Empire looked at the strange scene in the sky with his mouth wide open. He ran back to the pavilion and hurriedly flipped through the books, wanting to know what this strange scene represented. The moon had a green light and the red light clashed. Bane didn't lie lazily on the thatched roof of his house and look at the moon as usual. Instead, he sat cross-legged and looked at the moon attentively. Rueli didn't know what his father was looking at, so he followed him. When he saw that the moonlight was no longer soft and beautiful, and the bright light became ordinary, his eyes became sore and his neck hurt. He was tired of looking at the moon, and Roeli didn't find anything special. Until the green light flashed and the red light corresponded. Dad! This is... Bane was also stunned, and his eyes narrowed. He thought to himself that they were quite ruthless. But what was Jilin doing? He could have taken it down easily. Could it be that he was hesitating? Everyone in the Middle Empire's palace saw the strange scene in the sky and thought that His Majesty had succeeded. They all knelt down and kowtowed to the moon, praising His Majesty's might. Only the few people who had seen Jilin narrowed their eyes and looked anxious. How could this be? How did the Red Calamity know about His Majesty's actions today? Could it be that someone leaked the secret? Mother! Li Wuyu grasped his mother's hand tightly. Xueqing pinched her daughter's hand hard. Li Wuyu was stunned for a moment and immediately stopped shouting. Whisper! No matter what, we can't panic, Xueqing said. Imperial Mother, will Imperial Father be all right? Uncle Long. Don't worry. Xueqing patted her daughter's hand. Then, he turned around and walked back to his bedroom. Brother. Li Wuyu looked at Li Wuyu. Li Wuyu shook his head gently. Facing the strange phenomenon in the sky, everyone had their own guesses, and everyone had different opinions. This was how the world worked. 10,000 people would have 10,000 guesses and delusions about the same thing. However, there were very few people who could truly see the essence of things. In any case, the truth was not important to them. Above the moon, Jilin twisted his body and shook off the few flying swords that were of extremely high grade. Not bad. Jilin said, in just 20 years, you can already hurt me. I don't want to either. Third young master said in a deep voice, back then, Staya plotted to make you fake your death and deceive everyone in the world. Although this isn't considered a good idea for humans, it's not a good idea. Although this was not a good idea for humans, it might not be a perfect plan for your brother Long. You don't have the intention to kill people for fun. Why didn't Brother Long enter the shallows and bind his own hands and feet? What can I get by wronging myself like that? Dissolving water in the sea, moving trees in the forest. Truly entering this world, no longer being high and mighty, truly living. Together with all living beings. Truly living? Jilin sneered, his laughter full of disdain. Living like a human is truly living? Summer insects can't talk about ice. You're only 100 years old, and you're telling me that you're truly living? Your life is just a snap of my fingers. You're overestimating yourself. Brother Long, how old are you this year? The third prince suddenly asked. Jilin was stunned. About 5, 6 or 700 years old. According to what you humans say. Brother Long, you entered the world more than 20 years ago. Don't you feel that your changes in these 20 years are greater than the changes in the previous few hundred years? Although the divine turtle has a lifespan, it has an end. Although it lives long, it's meaningless. As for what is truly living, I think Brother Long has already experienced a thing or two. Jilin blinked. The terracotta soldiers around him were all motionless, as if they were waiting for the two to finish their second conversation. You want me to live like a human? Jilin said. It's just a suggestion. Work at sunrise and rest at sunset. A life of labor, daily chores, 3 meals a day. Brother Long, why don't you experience it? Why should I experience it? By then, maybe Brother Long will be able to completely understand Staya's intentions. You'll know why a human life is precious. Jilin opened his mouth. He wanted to say something to the third prince. But suddenly, his heart tightened, and an uncomfortable feeling crept up his back. Jilin looked towards the direction of the feeling. On the walls of White Jade Capital, countless siege crossbows were set up. Those were not normal siege crossbows. Because they were very huge, and seemed to be extremely powerful. You're stalling for time? Jilin said in a low voice. If it was someone familiar with Jilin like Bane, he would realize that Jilin was planning to take revenge upon hearing Jilin's words. All is fair in war. The third prince's voice became very cheerful. Although I'm stalling for time, what I said just now was from the bottom of my heart. Brother Long, if you're willing, I'm willing to discuss it in detail. *CK your talk. Jilin admitted that he had been tricked once, and naturally, he did not want to be tricked again. He flapped his wings and flew towards the third prince like a red arrow. The only difference between Jilin and an arrow was that he was countless times faster than an arrow. The third prince's reaction was not slow either. The soldiers who were originally standing still on the ground suddenly moved and rushed towards Jilin. The crossbows on the walls of White Jade Capital were also fired. Jilin did not dare to be careless when facing the weapon that could make his heart tighten. He opened his dragon mouth, and countless flames gushed out. Jilin's mind moved slightly, and the flames seemed to come alive and surrounded him. They blocked the arrows and crossbows that were shot at him, so that the third prince's mercenaries could not get close. The flames were Jilin's millions of soldiers. You can even start a fire here? The third prince exclaimed. That's why humans are insignificant. As Jilin spoke, he was already like a sharp knife in the crowd of figurines, cutting through the layers of encirclement. In an instant, he was in front of the third prince. Jilin threw a punch. The third prince disappeared. Jilin was stunned. Only then did he realize that it was an illusion. Chapter 5:13. An illusion? Jilin was stunned. Immediately after, boundless anger rose from the bottom of his heart to the top of his head. Ridiculous. Jilin felt incomparably ridiculous and angry. He felt a sense of humiliation and frustration, as if he was an old hunter who had been deceived by a fox's simple trick. After hunting birds all day, he was finally pecked blind by a bird. A strong dragon was bitten by a poisonous snake in the gutter. Even if the injury wasn't great, how could he face others if word got out? Jilin was anxious. Who was Jilin? He was the son of the Golden Dragon King of the dragon race. If other people were deceived by this little trick of the third prince, then so be it. But he had the golden dragon eyes that could see through everything. He actually fell for this trick? The third prince. Jilin roared, the golden light in his eyes shining brightly. The golden dragon eyes were fully opened. You've gone too far. You actually used this kind of trick on me. Under the illumination of the golden light, all of the illusions dissipated. Reality was revealed. Jilin was suddenly stunned. Because the scenery in his eyes didn't change at all. Was it all real, Brother Long? The third prince's voice suddenly sounded on the entire moon. What are you doing? Jilin said, didn't you want to fight me? Why are you hiding? Brother Long, humans are not used to facing enemies other than humans head-on. This is how humans fight. Then how are you going to hurt me? How are you going to win? Jilin asked, with these figurines? Crossbows? Brother Long, I never thought of using these to defeat you. These are just things to buy time. And now, it's almost time. What tricks do you have? Just use them all. No need to be mysterious. Jilin said in a low voice. Brother Long, didn't you come for the world annihilation bomb? Then, you should experience it for yourself. Be careful. Jilin's pupils shrank slightly, and that feeling of fear crept into his heart once again. Only then did Jilin realize that what he was afraid of was not the crossbow bolts, but the third prince's backup plan. The third prince did not seem to want to give Jilin any time to react. As the third prince finished his words, several beams of light suddenly shot out from the ground of White Jade Jing, then, a bright light shone brightly. Wherever the light touched, everything turned to ashes. The entire moon was shaking. The moon tonight was as dazzling as the sun. The third prince was wearing the Solar Emperor throne, hiding in the center of the back of the moon. Logically speaking, he was a moon away from the place where the annihilation bomb exploded. But even so, the the third prince still felt a suffocating sense of crisis shrouding his heart. He also felt the moon's trembling. It also made the third prince's blood boil. After a long time, the moon finally calmed down. The third prince flew out from the back of the moon, and when he saw the scene after the explosion of the world annihilation bomb, he could not help but gasp. The place where white jade Jing was turned into a huge pit. An extremely huge pit. No, calling it a huge pit was too small. Or rather, more than half of the moon was gone. A world annihilation bomb had turned the moon into a real crescent moon. It's over. The third prince thought to himself. There will no longer be a full moon in this world. This time, his teacher will probably be in tears. The moon is one of the greatest romances of mankind. From now on, people have their joys and sorrows, and the moon has its waxing and waning. These ancient sayings no longer make sense. Who wrote such a good poem? Ah, right, it was Brother Long who told me. Brother Long, the third prince looked around, and even most of the clouds had turned into nothingness. Where could he see even half of Jilin's shadow? The third prince was stunned for a long time, and thought to himself, it can't be. Brother Long died just like that? It shouldn't be. According to the Iron Blood King, at least 5 world annihilation bombs were needed to kill Brother Long. The third prince's blood instantly turned cold. Brother Long? The third prince used his human emperor's power to spread his voice throughout the universe. Brother Long, where are you? You can't be dead, right? In your dreams. Jilin's voice sounded behind the third prince. The third prince suddenly turned around. He saw Jilin right behind him. Jilin had already turned into a red-haired, golden-eyed youth, and a black book was floating beside his right hand. He was completely unscathed. The third prince immediately understood. Since Jilin had brought Aisha's dark sacred codex, he had naturally used a teleportation spell to leave at the moment of the explosion. Brother Long, why did you bring this thing? The third prince was helpless. Is it necessary for you? Facts have proven that it's always better to be prepared, Jilin said as he stared at the third prince. Brother Long, in that case, do you want to continue? Jilin looked at the third prince without saying anything. The third prince seemed to have understood. He raised his hands slightly, and the white jade capital appeared again. Half of the moon had been blasted into nothingness, but the white jade capital was still intact. Countless figurine soldiers lined up in formation again. The battle seemed to be no different from the beginning. The third prince looked at Jilin. From his posture and aura, he seemed to be full of confidence. Jilin also looked at the third prince and suddenly smiled. He had been waiting for this moment. There's no need to fight anymore. Jilin said calmly, I've seen the power of the world annihilation bomb. It's indeed a weapon that can kill gods. Oh? The third prince was stunned, and then asked in joy, Brother Long is willing to give up on the world annihilation bomb? No. Jilin shook his head, and the third prince's heart, which had just been a little shaken, instantly calmed down. What I mean is that the outcome has been decided. I've already won, so there's no need to fight anymore, Jilin said calmly. The third prince was stunned at first, and then he chuckled. Brother Long, why do you say that? I've already seen through the white jade capital's true situation. It can't stop me, but I can make you unable to fight back with a single finger. Do you believe me? The third prince knew that Jilin rarely lied when it came to such matters. If he said he would kill you with one punch, he wouldn't use a second punch. However, he had the entire white jade capital behind him, and there were many world annihilation bombs beneath it. I don't believe it, said the third prince. You. Jilin raised a finger and pointed at the third prince. You don't believe in heresy. Pa. There was no sound in heavens beyond heaven, but there seemed to be a crisp sound. The red gem on the chest of the third prince's sun-human sovereign throne shattered under Jilin's finger. Without the sunstone's protection, an indescribable low temperature assaulted him. The human sovereign throne froze once again. It went from the armor that protected the third prince to an iron shell that restrained him. How can this be? The third prince was alarmed. However, after his shock, he suddenly realized that it made sense. The Sunstone was brought out from the Red Dragon Palace. If he had been scheming against him all along, it was impossible for him not to do so. This was the most effective and simplest method. In human terms, this was called removing the firewood from under the cauldron. Chapter 5:14. The third prince's thoughts flashed through his mind like sunlight. He didn't know how Jilin had schemed against him. Tampering with the Sunstone was indeed the most useful and efficient method, but because it was too efficient, it didn't have much meaning. Even the third prince could think of such a method in a moment of desperation. How could the ministers of the Middle Empire, who thought that they were meticulous and calculated every step, not think of it? In the end, how could he have fallen for such a shallow trick? Jilin flew to the third prince's side and gently placed his hand on the third prince's chest. Waves of heat spewed out from Jilin's hand, dispelling the cold air of outer sky. Brother Long. The third prince's voice had never been so dry. I didn't want to kill you, Jilin said. I don't admire many humans, but you're one of them. What a pity. You're clearly not a layman, but you sit in the most mundane position and do mundane things. Isn't this all thanks to you? The third prince laughed bitterly. He had completely lost. In this extremely cold place, he had lost the Sunstone that he relied on to survive. Now, as long as Jilin didn't help him dispel the cold air, he would die immediately. The current situation couldn't even be described as being on someone's chopping block. Life and death were in the hands of a single thought. Brother Long, how did you do it? The third prince couldn't help but ask at noon. What? Jilin said. You tampered with the Sunstone and successfully installed it on my throne. How did you know that I was going to land on the moon today? How did you do it? Jilin was now confident of victory. He really couldn't think of any other variables that the third prince could have, so he was willing to talk to him more. Then it's not the Sunstone. It's just an ordinary stone. I just used the refining method to refine it. As for how it got on your armor, it's very simple. I knew that even if you took it back, you wouldn't use it directly. Instead, you would go through layers of inspection, so I asked Aisha to cast a curse on the stone. Curse? Yes, a curse. Jilin placed one hand on the chest of the third prince's armor, while the other took out the dark scripture. According to human legends, witches can bewitch people's minds, make them delirious, and even control their minds. Although it's a little exaggerated, it's not all groundless. It turns out that some human legends have some credibility. Jilin sighed. I asked Aisha to place a curse on the stone. It will give people a strong psychological hint. Anyone who sees this stone will think that it is the Sunstone. Not to mention you humans who have never seen a Sunstone before. Even if the Dwarf King has a Sunstone, he will think that it is a Sunstone, even if they don't look alike. Tisk. The third prince clicked his tongue. You've tried it? Of course, Jilin said. Brother Long is better than you. I admire you. Thank you for letting me win. Jilin's smile was very fake. As for how I know you landed on the moon today. I've been waiting for you here for more than 10 days. Jilin's answer made the third prince feel a lot better. Brother Bay is on your side this time? The third prince suddenly asked. You don't understand how important Staya is in his heart. Do you? He can die for Staya without hesitation. The third prince was silent for a moment. Brother Bay has a wife, go away. Jilin interrupted the third prince in time and rolled his eyes at the third prince. You really can't change a dog's habit. Bane and Staya don't have that kind of relationship. Then what kind of relationship? If I have to say, it's like the princess and the knight in the human story. Ha, the knight is so much weaker than the princess? Your guards are also much weaker than you. Even so, I didn't expect Brother Bay to be so persistent. According to Aisha, Bane didn't have parents when he was young. Although he had neighbors to take care of him, he didn't have a good life. Until Staya appeared. That was the first ray of light in his dark life, so it was not strange that he was willing to sacrifice himself for that ray of light. Like a moth to the flame. It's not suicide. He just wants to embrace and be close to the light. Jilin gritted his teeth after he finished speaking. He felt that his words were too sarcastic. The third prince was also stunned for a while. He didn't expect Jilin to say something like that. Even if he was just repeating Aisha's words, but that means the life and death of millions of people. It's not a game, the third prince said. When the only light in your world is extinguished, you even want to die. You want to die, why do you care about others? It has nothing to do with you, Jilin mocked. Of course it has something to do with me. The third prince said firmly. And on one side is one person, and on the other side are millions of people. Normal people know how to choose. Yes, yes, yes. Jilin nodded repeatedly. He was tired of talking to the third prince. You're the emperor of humans. Of course you care more about the people. So I didn't ask you to help, right? I can understand why you tried to stop me. I didn't try to kill them either, right? Jilin looked behind the third prince. He glanced at the direction and pushed gently. The third prince floated backward. This was heavens beyond. With Jilin's strength, the third prince would land in the Middle Empire, or somewhere in the Simi Empire. It could also be the endless ocean. I haven't seen many of your so-called normal people. Most of them are dead. Seeing the third prince float away, Jilin looked at the white jade capital on the moon. The white jade capital was sitting on the moon. It was very real. Jilin saw it when he used the golden eyes. This white jade capital was a small world of a human sage. That was why it could turn from reality to illusion, and from illusion to reality. Jilin's own small world was the same. That sage had probably died a long time ago. It was just that his small world had been preserved by humans using some kind of technology. It could be summoned by the third prince with the power of the human emperor. Since it had been summoned, the small world of a human sage naturally couldn't stop Jilin. Jilin flew toward the white jade capital. Hundreds of thousands of figurine soldiers armed their bows and halberds. It seemed that even if the third prince wasn't here, the white jade capital still had its own defensive measures. But Jilin didn't care. Jilin flipped through the darkness scripture casually. One after another, huge teleportation doors opened behind Jilin. Then, one teleportation portal after another spread toward the white jade capital. Until the teleportation portals covered the entire sky of the white jade capital, Jilin used the darkness scripture to cast the teleportation portal. The scene was too different from when Aisha used it. Aisha usually opened one portal at a time, but Jilin opened hundreds of portals this time. A god-slaying cannon's muzzle stretched out from each teleportation portal, then, flames soared into the sky. Hundreds of god-slaying cannons, which could destroy a moving city with one shot, fired at the same time. It destroyed the world. The white jade capital slowly collapsed under the countless cannons falling from the sky. Chapter 5:15. Hundreds of thousands of terracotta soldiers were turned into pieces under the fire of the god-slaying cannon. Then, the white jade capital was razed to the ground. Jilin looked at the white jade capital. Although only a few of the bricks were left intact, he didn't stop. In the end, the moon was pierced through. The moon that had already turned into a crescent moon shattered into pieces. They were scattered. Jilin said, "That's enough." He didn't believe that the humans had any backup plan after the moon was destroyed. The god-slaying cannon stopped. Jilin shut down countless teleportation arrays. He glanced at the broken pieces and smiled. This night was destined to be a sleepless night for everyone. Even those who went to bed early were woken up by their friends and relatives to see this wonderful scene that was hard to come by in a million years. Everyone was looking up at this astronomical scene that was hard to come by in a million years. Today, the moon was a full moon. Then, a blue light flashed on the moon, followed by a red light. Then, the moon emitted a light that was more dazzling than the sun, covering the moon. When the light faded, the full moon became a crescent moon. Finally, countless light spots bloomed on the moon. The moon became a few big pieces and dozens of small pieces. People knelt on the ground and bowed. They didn't know what had happened. They thought that the gods were fighting on the moon and that it was the end of the world. Bane looked at the moon for a long time and didn't say anything. After a long time, he finally squeezed out half a word. He thought to himself, "Did I get into trouble this time? Dad?" Royally was also dumbfounded. He had been looking at the moon for more than 20 years. Why was it gone all of a sudden? Damn it! Bane cursed. He thought to himself, this is something that can be solved with a thought. God knows why Jilin made such a big commotion. The moon was gone, who knew what would happen? Would the road become darker when walking at night? It was okay now. The problem was that no one would be able to see the moon for countless years. Aya, Bane sighed. That moon wasn't his anyway. He didn't know why he felt pity. This scene, suddenly, a female voice sounded from behind Bane. Bane and his son both turned around and saw Aisha coming out of the teleportation array. Isn't this a bit too much? Aisha said as she looked at the moon. When did you set up a teleportation portal in my house? Bane's eyes widened as he asked. He felt as if he had bought a door for nothing. Aisha ignored Bane. She looked at the moon and sighed. Look at what you've done. This is going to be troublesome. Trouble? Bane was stunned. Other than the fact that the sky is getting darker, what's the trouble? Aisha rolled her eyes at Bane. Do you think the moon is just a light? Bane blinked. He suddenly felt that something was wrong, so he pretended to be innocent and shook his head. What else can I do? If the world loses the moon, it will bring about unpredictable changes. Aisha's expression was very solemn. Bane looked at Aisha's expression and felt a little shocked. Solemn. These two words seemed to be thousands of miles away from Aisha. She wasn't the kind of solemn and rigid person. She was more of a cynical person. No matter how big the matter was, it could be downplayed in her eyes. The most important thing was that this old woman who was hundreds of years old was very strong and prideful. She felt that since she had lived so many years longer than the people of the world, she should be much more superior than them. So, even if she lifted a mountain and used up all her strength, she would still smile and act as if it was as light as a feather. Even if she couldn't control the overall situation and wasn't sure, she would still pretend to be able to foresee everything. But now, Bane saw a solemn expression on her face. Bane, who was familiar with Aisha's character, knew what this meant. It seemed to be a bigger matter than the sky falling down. Without the moon, what will happen? Bane asked seriously. I don't know. It was rare for Aisha to say such a thing. Bane had never heard Aisha say such a thing, so he didn't know how to respond. But thinking about it, it was also reasonable. After all, the moon had never disappeared before. The disappearance of the moon is not as simple as the night darkening. It means that many laws have lost their effectiveness. For example, have you heard of a werewolf race that is several times stronger than usual when it's a full moon? Aisha asked. Bane nodded. Then tell me, how do they transform now? Bane was stunned. He seemed to understand a little bit of what Aisha meant. Also, do you know how many witches' magic can only be used when the moon is full? Do you know that the Middle Empire's magic circle has to be adjusted according to the moon's waxing and waning? Bane nodded repeatedly. He knew this. He had dabbled in the Middle Empire's magic circle and witches' magic. He had come into contact with witches' magic in the Middle Empire's magic circle. Then this, Aisha sighed. It can't be helped. We can only accept what has already happened. Bane was silent. Royally was at a loss and didn't dare to act rashly, even though this was his roof. Because he knew who this woman was. Thousand Spirit Kingdom, the shadow of the Red Disaster, the witch Aisha. Roeli wanted to politely greet Aisha so as not to embarrass his father. But he didn't know how to address her. This woman looked young and hot. Should he call her sister? But he heard that she was at least 200 years old. She was close to his father. Should he call her auntie? But he heard that she was at least 200 years old. Then, should he call her grandma? This was in line with her rumored age. But looking at Aisha's young face, Roeli felt that this address was too dangerous. It had to be said that Roeli's guide at the border of the Simai Empire for many years had its benefits. At least he had developed an intuition about women. He didn't call Aisha grandma and thus saved his house. Fortunately, he didn't stay silent for long before Aisha suddenly spoke. "It's here." "It's here? What's here?" Roeli didn't understand and looked at Aisha. He saw that Aisha was looking at his courtyard without blinking. Roeli followed Aisha's gaze. He saw a portal quietly open in his courtyard. A red-haired young man wearing a red robe walked out of the portal. The Red Disaster. Roeli's hands turned cold. Since he was born, the king of Thousand Spirit Kingdom, the Red Disaster, had never come out of the volcano. But tonight, he actually appeared in front of her house so openly and without any concealment. It turned out that he wasn't restrained by some almighty human and didn't come out of the volcano because he was afraid. It was just that he didn't want to come out. It turned out that the human race had been safe for so many years, but there was no guarantee at all. Bane looked at Jilin. He didn't think as much as his son. He just stood up and looked at Jilin. "Got it?" Jilin smiled. "Got it." Chapter 5:16. Got it. Bane let out a long sigh. A faint smile appeared on Bane's face as he jumped down from the roof of his house. He pointed at the sky and said to Jilin, "Look, the moon is gone. Do you have to do this? I'm afraid that if I do it, the third prince will die of anger." Jilin said maliciously, "I have to let him vent." Bane was stunned. "That's true." "What's true?" Aisha was unhappy. "What are you talking about?" Jilin looked at Aisha and was a little confused. Just like how Bane had never seen her like this, Jilin had never seen her like this. "What's wrong with you?" Jilin asked. "Nothing, nothing." Bane pulled Jilin to the side and kept winking at Aisha. He hoped that Aisha could calm down a little. Jilin might not care about the things that he and Aisha cared about. "Is the annihilation bullet powerful?" Bane suddenly asked. Actually, he was asking the obvious. The light from the moon was brighter than the sun. Anyone who wasn't blind would be able to see it. How could it not be powerful? But he just wanted to hear it from Jilin's mouth. Jilin's face stiffened. He rubbed his chin and didn't say anything. From the bottom of his heart, he didn't want to praise the puny humans, but it was the truth. After a while, Jilin said with difficulty, "It's still very powerful." The stone in Bane's heart was finally lifted. Then, Bane looked at Jilin, his eyes full of anticipation. "We'll go find the Demon King in 3 days." Jilin said. Bane looked at Jilin seriously. He thought to himself, is this trip to the moon very difficult? Jilin actually has to rest for 3 days? Are you confident? Bane asked. The Elven Queen has countless divine weapons. As for confidence, I definitely don't have any, Jilin said. But you don't have to worry about the deity artifact. I have the Forbidden Zone, so I can render the deity artifact ineffective. Then why didn't you use it before? Bane asked. She couldn't win even if she used it on the Elf Island. Bane nodded. What do you need me to do? You've already done a lot. Jilin said, actually, I think what the third prince said makes sense. After all, you're a human. Isn't this betraying your own race? I won't. Bane shook his head. Because I know you better than the third prince. You are not a bloodthirsty dragon who kills innocent people. Silence filled the room. Jilin and Aisha were disgusted by Bane's shameless words. It was indeed too embarrassing. Royally was even more shocked. He thought, Dad, what are you saying? He is the Red Calamity. Isn't he bloodthirsty? Isn't he killing innocent people? Is there anyone in this world who has killed more people than him? At this moment, Royally's world was shattered. This, Bane suddenly said. According to your plan with the Demon King, you want the true race to invade the human race, then the Elven Queen will come to the rescue and lose a lot of strength. Then, you and the Demon King will attack them when they're unprepared, right? Jilin thought for a moment. Times have changed. Now that things have come to this, there's no need to go through so much trouble. Then what are you going to do? Bane was dumbfounded. He thought, how can such an important plan change so easily? I'll go talk to the Elven Queen first, Jilin said. When? Aisha asked. Right now. In fact, Jilin was far from a dragon that could rise and move. Compared to moving around, he preferred to stay on his golden mountain all day. But this time, after Jilin said he would go, he really went. I'll use the darkness scripture again. I'll return it to you later. Before Jilin finished speaking, he used the darkness scripture to open a portal and stepped in. He can't hold it in anymore, Aisha said as she watched Jilin disappear. Me too. Bane raised one of his hands and showed it to Aisha. She could see that his hand was trembling uncontrollably. Trembling hands, this was a very rare phenomenon for the #1 thief in the world. When a thief picked a lock, he would definitely be excited. The excitement of being about to succeed and the fear of being discovered. But no matter how excited he was, his hand couldn't tremble. Because if his hand trembled, the lock couldn't be picked. This was the basic quality of a thief. Aisha knew that although Bane looked ordinary, he was very outstanding in certain aspects. For example, when he was stealing things from the Duke's mansion in the Snowwind Empire, even if his heart was beating as fast as a horse's hooves, he was still able to pick the lock smoothly, but now, his hand was trembling so badly. Is it necessary? Aisha asked. It's necessary. Bane said, because this is an unprecedented challenge. In the past, no, ever since the thief profession was created, the things we stole were either from people or from the dead. But this time, we stole something that was taken away by the heavens. Bane clenched his fists, his hands naturally no longer trembled. Riri looked at his father, feeling more and more unfamiliar. Jilin originally wanted to directly leave the Elf Island with the darkness scripture, but after thinking about it, he turned around and went to the sea far away from the land. Jilin floated less than 2 inches above the sea. It seemed like he was standing on the sea. Jilin stood there for a while. An old man wearing luxurious clothes and a crown poked his upper body out of the sea. The king of the Oceanic tribe. Dragon God, why did you come here alone? It's nothing. Crimson Unicorn stopped the king of the sea tribe from talking about a lot of meaningless nonsense. With the place I am standing at as the center, within a radius of 10,000 li, 20,000 li, no, within 30,000 li of the sea, clear everything. How long will it take? The king of the Oceanic tribe was stunned. Clear everything within 30,000 li of the sea. That's right, not even a fish can be left behind, Jilin said. How long will it take? The king of the Oceanic tribe was in a difficult position. No one had done this before. I can order the Oceanic tribe, but even so, I'm afraid it will take 2 days, then let's begin. After saying this, Jilin summoned the entrance to his small world and took out a metal ball the size of a house. There were many patterns on the metal ball, and they were densely packed together. It was impossible to see what they meant. Jilin casually threw the metal ball into the water and turned around to leave. Seeing this, the king of the Oceanic tribe suddenly broke out in a cold sweat for some reason. He no longer hesitated. He took out his scepter and heavily poked the surface of the water. The water seemed to turn into the ground, and a loud sound was produced by the scepter. The sea suddenly became as flat as a road. However, layers of ripples began to spread from the point of the scepter. Countless creatures in the sea began to frantically escape from this place as if they were avoiding a natural disaster. Jilin randomly found an uninhabited island and lay down on the island to rest for 2 days. He didn't dare to sleep. 2 days later, Jilin opened his golden eyes. Chapter 5:17. Jilin opened his eyes, and the light in his eyes was like flowing gold. After resting for 2 days, he felt much more relaxed. This trip to the moon was not an easy one for him. Jilin let out a long sigh and set off a gust of wind on the sea. Then, he raised his head and looked at the sky. The sun was still shining brightly, the clouds were white, the sea was blue, and the sea breeze was gentle. There was nothing more beautiful in the world than the clear sea on a clear day that could open one's mind. When you looked at the boundless sea, you would naturally feel that the world was vast, and that the trivial things that troubled you were not even worth mentioning. However, when you finished looking at the sea and were on your way home, you would realize that you still had to deal with those trivial things, and that you could not even deal with them. Those trivial things would still creep into your mind. The shattered moon could not be seen by people at this time, but Jilin could naturally see it. After resting for 2 days with his eyes closed, he could clearly sense that there were obvious changes in the world. It was as if some kind of balance had been broken, and the distribution of elements was missing. It seemed that Aisha's words weren't baseless and groundless. The world had unknowingly undergone a huge change because of him. Jilin did not know what the consequences of this change would be. Therefore, Jilin decided not to think about it anymore, and looked at the sea to relax. After half a day, Jilin summoned the scripture of darkness. The path to the elven island was opened. Jilin was stunned when he came out of the teleportation array, because he found that the elven queen was already standing on the shore. "You're waiting for me?" Jilin asked. "That's very obvious." The elven queen narrowed her eyes and looked at Jilin as she spoke in a deep voice. This was a straightforward attitude of speak quickly if you have something to say. The elven queen was eager to understand Jilin's thoughts, but Jilin did not want to be so straightforward. "How did you know I was coming at this time?" Jilin asked. "It was very difficult for me not to notice your battle with the human emperor," the elven queen said. "Then do you know why I fought with the third prince?" Jilin asked. "You stole the strongest weapon of the human race." The elven queen said with certainty, "I've seen the current human emperor before. He's outstanding and can be called the chosen one. He's good at everything except for one thing, which is that he's overly sentimental." "How do you know?" Jilin suddenly shouted. The elven queen's words caused a huge earthquake in his heart that could overturn a city. He was too sentimental. What did he mean by that? Jilin looked at the elven queen's perfect face, which was meticulously sculpted by the gods, and her even more perfect figure, which was constantly emitting charm. She had met the third prince before. Thinking back to the third prince's behavior in Spring Breeze restaurant, while thinking, Jilin nodded. The more he thought about it, the more he felt that he was on the right track. However, Jilin could not help but feel his mouth go dry when he caught a glimpse of the elven queen's frosty face. "All right." Scarlet Unicorn thought to himself. He was probably wrong. "Then what do you mean?" Jilin asked. "He had a chance to kill you on the moon," the elven queen said coldly. Jilin narrowed his eyes and did not say anything, which was a tacit admission. Even Jilin was shocked by the number of annihilation bombs hidden in the white jade capital. Even if he had the darkness scripture and could open a portal at any time, he could not guarantee that he would be unharmed. Jilin had held back on the third prince. He could have frozen the third prince in the sky beyond the sky the moment the third prince summoned the white jade capital. The third prince had also held back on Jilin. The human emperor's power could detonate all the annihilation bombs at the same time. "You're right," Jilin said. "He's a soft-hearted person. Or, to put it in a more disgusting way, he's a gentle person." "What a pity." The elven queen nodded and said. No one knew why she felt pity. "Why are you standing here?" Jilin asked. "I'm waiting for you." "Since when?" "Since the moon was shattered." "Then you've been waiting for a long time." How did you know I was coming? It's not a secret that humans have annihilation bombs on the moon. You're invincible in this world where the Demon King has not fully inherited the throne. But you, who's invincible, still want to scheme against humans' weapons to strengthen yourself. There's no doubt that you're making these preparations to deal with me, who's stronger than you. Jilin smacked his lips. At this moment, he suddenly thought of something. Everyone knew what Sima Zhao was thinking. The second in the world practiced martial arts so hard to defeat the first in the world. This was something that everyone could see. The first in the world was not blind. I don't want to defeat you, Jilin said. I just want to do something. I have to defeat you. What is it? The Elven Queen asked. You told me before that all living things in the world are living under the shadow of the gods and dragons. They seem to be free, but that's not the case. The fate of all living things can be interfered with by the gods. That's not real life. You said that the gods gave humans life, but didn't let them live. That's not right. So you want me to help all living things break free from the control of higher life forms. And what you're doing is to exterminate the dragons and gods. You'll exterminate the dragons, and I'll exterminate the gods. Yes, what's the problem? The Elven Queen asked. No problem. Jilin smiled and spread his hands. It's just that the success rate is too low. You're afraid of death? The Elven Queen asked. As long as it's a living thing, it's afraid of death. There's nothing strange about this. The gods don't understand because you're not real living things. But we, the dragons, are. We just live longer. Jilin said. So we also understand a principle, and that is, as long as it's a living thing, there will be a day when it disappears. Have you ever heard of the saying the dead are gone? What do you mean? The Elven Queen didn't understand what Jilin meant. She had never seen the dragons lower themselves like this, and admit that they were afraid of death so directly. What I'm trying to say is, why? Why is the end of life only death? Why is it that after it disappears? Why is it that the dead can't be chased? If that's the case, then life is such an empty existence. When death comes, everything in life becomes meaningless. It doesn't matter if your life is mediocre or if you save the world. After you die, everything will be meaningless. It's like a game. When the game ends, nothing is left. So, why? Why must we die when we're born? Since we must die, why are we born? The Elven Queen was silent for a long time. This is the rule set by the one who created everything. But here, in this world, this is the rule set by the gods. Jilin said. To help all living things completely break free from the control of the gods, instead of rushing to the heavenly realm to fight to the death, where we don't even know if we can win, it's more reliable and efficient to completely overturn the rule set by the gods in this world. For example, I want there to be no more death in this world. I want death to be reversible. I want to resurrect a person. That's impossible. It's possible. Give me the core of the world. Chapter 5:18. Jilin and the Elven Queen had finally reached a moment like this. Diplomacy before violence, the dagger was revealed. All the foreshadowing was for this moment, when the cold light suddenly appeared and the murderous intent was revealed. When the generals introduced themselves, no matter how polite they were, it was difficult to hide the barbaric bloodshed that followed. Jilin finally explained his intention. The core of the world. The core of the world. The Elven Queen became serious when she heard these 4 words. Yes, Jilin said. Do you know what that means? The Elven Queen asked. It means that you have mastered the rules of the world, and death can be reversed. Jilin said. No, no, no. The Elven Queen shook her head. Then what do you think it means? Jilin said. It means that one of us must die, the Elven Queen said. Who do you think it will be? The Elven Queen raised her eyebrows, took out a bow, knocked an arrow, and shot an arrow into the sky. Then, there was a temporary sun in the sky. This arrow alone could illuminate the world. Naturally, it could also severely injure Jilin. This was a demonstration, or it could be said to be a threat. Jilin looked up at the remaining power of the arrow. The scorching light was like the sun. Is this necessary? Jilin tilted his head and asked, don't you and I have the same goal? It's just that the method is different. Why don't you want to try my method? Death should not be reversed. The Elven Queen was silent for a long time, then said this. You're a Protoss, you don't have to die, of course you'd say that. Jilin expressed his disdain. He thought that the Elven Queen's words were easy for her to say. If the Elven Queen also had people or things that she valued and could not avoid dying, she probably would not say something like that. Elven Queen, all living things are suffering, the fundamental reason is that you don't care about escaping death. Jilin said, if you really want to save all living things, why don't you start from the root? The Elven Queen was too lazy to say anything more to Jilin, and at this point, it was useless to say anything more. You've lived for hundreds of years for nothing. The Elven Queen looked at Jilin and said, your understanding of life and death now can't even compare to a human who has only lived for a mere 100 years. Jilin was suddenly stunned. The third prince had said the same thing before. What do you mean? There's no point in telling you, the Elven Queen said. Then there's no need to talk about it. Jilin was also annoyed. Since they were not on the Elf Island, there was no need for him to be so afraid of the Elf Queen. If you ask me, one of us will definitely die. Who do you think it will be? Jilin raised his hand and snapped his fingers. If it was before, it would have been me. But now, it might not be so. As soon as Jilin finished snapping his fingers, a huge explosion resounded between heaven and earth. An incomparably huge water column soared into the sky. The water pillar was as thick as a mountain. From afar, it seemed to connect the sea and the sky. Even the sea level had dropped quite a bit. By the time the water column fell back down, when the water fell back, huge waves surged on the surface of the sea. The water column was not far away from the Elf Island. The huge waves that seemed to be able to smash the cliffs crashed towards the Elf Island. When it passed by Jilin, part of it was instantly evaporated by the high temperature around Jilin's body. It did not touch Jilin at all. When the huge waves entered the Elf Island, it instantly became calm, like an ancient well without ripples. The huge waves that entered the Elf Island were like young girls. Just a moment ago, she was baring her fangs and brandishing her claws like a little tiger. The next moment, she saw the boys she liked and immediately became quiet. She became gentle and refined, like a completely different person. When Jilin saw this, he deeply understood that the gap between him and the Elven Queen was not small. However, he cared. He now had a weapon that could make up for the gap between them. How is it? Jilin asked. The Elven Queen looked at Jilin carefully. The son of the Golden Dragon King and the Fire Dragon King. Not only can you command flames like a king, but you also inherited the Golden Dragon tribe's forbidden land. A dragon like you, even among the dragon race, is considered to be exceptionally gifted. Thank you, Jilin said politely. But how can you embarrass the dragon tribe like this? The Elven Queen continued. The dragon tribe uses sharp fangs and claws. Only you use a sword. The dragon tribe cultivates themselves and does not seek external methods. Only you, not only do you use a weapon, but you also used a world annihilation bomb that you stole from the human tribe. Don't you feel ashamed? Jilin's face immediately darkened. He thought that it was too early to say thank you. It's none of your business. Jilin was anxious. Besides, I didn't steal it. I snatched it. If the human emperor didn't go easy on you, would you be able to snatch it? The Elven Queen's words almost made Jilin choke to death. He really couldn't refute that. Back then, the third prince could make all the world annihilation bombs explode at any time. Even if he, Jilin, had the dark scripture and could leave in time, Jilin would still return empty-handed. Don't interrupt. Jilin didn't want to talk anymore. I'm just asking you one question. Will you give me the world core? Do you think you can kill me with the world annihilation bomb? The Elven Queen frowned. Although I don't know, it's worth a try, Jilin said. Besides, we can also make a deal. What kind of deal? You give me the world core and I'll give you all the world annihilation bombs. Jilin said, in this case, you just have to put them all into the heaven realm. Even without me, you can still destroy the gods and the dragon tribe. Use all the world annihilation bombs to destroy the gods and then destroy the dragon tribe yourself. This way, you can still achieve your initial goal. Isn't this more reliable than me attacking the gods? The Elven Queen was silent for a moment. Looks like you've thought it through very thoroughly. It doesn't sound like a problem. Your suggestion is also very reasonable. I don't have any reason to reject it. Jilin was overjoyed. If possible, he also wanted to fight the Elven Queen to the death. Then, but I refuse, the Elven Queen said. Jilin froze. Then, he felt waves of anger surging from the bottom of his heart. He felt that the Elven Queen was toying with him. I'll give you 10 days to come out of the Elven Island, Jilin said. I know that you'll receive a backlash. The oath of the gods, right? That backlash will make you extremely weak. I did it on purpose. What if I don't go out? The Elven Queen said. I'll place the world annihilation bomb in an unknown town in the Saimai Empire and blow that town into dust, Jilin said sinisterly. Guess where that town is? The Elven Queen's eyes narrowed into slits. Her gaze was as sharp as a newly sharpened knife. She stared at Jilin as if she wanted to cut Jilin into pieces with her gaze. Looks like you've guessed it, Jilin said with a smile. That's right. That's the hometown of the first Holy Maiden of Light. The place where her remains are buried. Jilin suddenly laughed out loud. His laughter was so maniacal. Rather than saying that he was pleased, it was more like he was hysterical. He didn't want to use such methods, but his opponent was the invincible Elven Queen. He had no choice. He completely gave up his pride as a dragon and became unscrupulous. At this moment, even Aisha would say despicable if she saw Jilin. Chapter 519. Jilin laughed hysterically, as if an evil villain had finally completed his evil plan. He looked up to the sky and howled, declaring his pride to the world. He used this to prove his existence. In order to defeat the Elven Queen, Jilin had given up all his pride. The Elven Queen did not say anything. She just looked at Jilin quietly. She looked at him for a long time until Jilin's laughter gradually stopped. Jilin looked at the Elven Queen and could not help but stop laughing. It was the first time he saw such an obvious expression on her face. It was anger. It seemed like the Elven Queen had the intention to kill him. Jilin had achieved his goal. Since the Elven Queen could not stand by and watch the first Saint's hometown and remains get blown up, there was no need for him to stay here. He had to make full use of these 10 days to make all the arrangements he could. 10 days later, it would be time for him and the Elven Queen to fight to the death. However, the Elven Queen did not seem to think so. The Elven Queen slowly walked towards Jilin. You shouldn't have mentioned her in front of me like that. Jilin stared at the Elven Queen with all his attention. He knew that the Elven Queen was referring to the first Saintess by her. However, he did not understand the Elven Queen's meaning behind such a verbal threat. She could not come out of the Elven Island now. Of course, Jilin was not afraid of her. He would not change his way of thinking and doing things because of a mere sentence. To say something disrespectful to the Elven Queen, no matter how timid a person was, they would not be afraid of a dog in a cage. It did not matter if it was a husky or a Tibetan mastiff. The Elven Queen was still walking towards Jilin step by step. When she reached the edge of the Elven Island, the invisible barrier of the Elven Island had already revealed itself. This was the warning given to the Elven Queen by the oath of the gods. This was probably the most powerful barrier in the entire universe. However, anyone could pass through it. Because it only guarded against the Elven Queen. Jilin did not believe that the Elven Queen would dare to continue walking forward. The barrier of the gods had only revealed the tip of the iceberg, and it was already enough to make Jilin feel fearful. However, the Elven Queen was still walking forward until she was only one step away from the Oath of the Gods. The barrier that enveloped the entire Elven Island was fully manifested. The colorful barrier made the Elven Island appear dreamy and dreamy. The entire barrier appeared as if it was a final warning to the Elven Queen. Jilin looked at the Elven Queen, thinking that it was time to stop. The Elven Queen also looked at Jilin without stopping. The Elven Queen took the last step without any hesitation. With a single step, the winds and clouds changed. The entire world seemed to have changed in an instant. Just a moment ago, the world was still sunny, the wind was light, the clouds were light, and the sea was calm. At this moment, the sky was filled with surging waves. Lightning flashed and thunder rumbled. The waves on the surface of the sea surged to the heavens. The sky darkened, the Elf Queen brazenly broke the Oath of the Gods and walked out of the Elf Island. Several beams of divine light suddenly descended from the sky and enveloped the Elven Queen. Jilin didn't have time to be shocked. He looked at the light and thought of the word divine punishment. The power of the divine light made Jilin not dare to act rashly. He just stood there and watched. After dozens of seconds, the divine light slowly faded away. The Elven Queen's figure appeared. She was still standing with her head held high, but she was extremely weak. Jilin could feel that the Elven Queen's aura was not even half as strong as before. The Demon King told him that the Oath of the Gods could weaken the Elven Queen by half. It seemed that he didn't tell him enough. Jilin looked at the Elven Queen, who was not as strong as before, and suddenly realized that he had underestimated the future King of Gods who had lived for God knows how many years. No, it could be said that he had been contaminated by the bad habits of humans. Before a fight, he had set a time, and 10 days later. Was this really something that a dragon like him would do? It was too stupid. 30 years ago, he probably wouldn't have thought that he would do something like this one day. What kind of human formalism was this? The Elven Queen's response was the most sensible. Since there was going to be a fight and he had the advantage. Instead of waiting 10 days for her to be ready, why not have a fight to the death now? Jilin thought over and over again, and in the end, he missed this move. He thought that the Elven Queen would at least be mentally prepared for such a huge price to pay. Who knew? She was actually so ruthless. Jilin realized that he was caught off guard when facing the Elven Queen. Die! The Elven Queen took out a bow and arrow and pointed it at Jilin from afar. Jilin didn't dare to let the Elven Queen shoot the arrow. He suddenly opened his eyes wide, and the golden light in his eyes became unprecedentedly dazzling. Forbidden Land. The bloodline skill of the Golden Dragon tribe. It prohibited all spells and treasures. The light on the Elven Queen's bow instantly dimmed. However, the Elven Queen didn't hesitate at all and immediately let go of the bow. Before the bow and arrow could land an inch in the air, the Elven Queen had already arrived in front of Jilin and punched him. Jilin was shocked and hurriedly blocked with his hands. Jilin had already changed back to his true form. His body was huge and comparable to a huge castle. His arms were also huge and densely covered with hard scales. The Elven Queen, on the other hand, had delicate arms like an ordinary person. Although such a person was extremely beautiful, when she stood next to the ferocious megalosaurus like Jilin, it was extremely easy to overlook her. With such a difference in size, anyone would think that the Elven Queen's punch was an egg smashing a rock. However, that was not the case. Boom! The Elven Queen's punch created a huge sonic boom. Even the seawater below her sank due to the wind pressure of this punch. Red only felt a huge force coming at him, and his entire body flew outwards like a huge meteor. When Jilin stabilized himself somewhere, he suddenly felt a sharp pain in his arm. Jilin looked down and found that his left forearm was broken. The front half of his forearm hung limply. Damn it! Jilin cursed in his heart. He thought that the Elven Queen's strength was too unreasonable, wasn't it? Jilin aligned his arm bone. The bone quickly healed under the effect of the dragon blood. Jilin looked at his rapidly healing arm and couldn't help but sigh in his heart. Even if the Elven Queen's strength was only 20 to 30% of her peak, she was still able to break his arm with one punch. However, it seemed that only 20 to 30% of her strength was left. Otherwise, with the Elven Queen's full strength punch, she should be able to directly break his forearm and then seriously injure him, if only he was a golden dragon with the strongest physical body in the dragon tribe. Then, there wouldn't be such a problem. If he was a golden dragon, even the Elven Queen would be able to suppress him in terms of physical strength. However, at this point, there was no point in saying more. Chapter 520. The effect of Jilin's dragon blood was very powerful. It was completely different from Lysana's borrowed blood. Not to mention that his forearm was only fractured. Even if it was really broken, it could grow back out of thin air. The Elven Queen had appeared in front of him again. Jilin sighed. He had read some of the military books that the third prince had given him. The books said that one must know oneself and the enemy to win 100 battles. One must not fight a battle that one was not confident in. However, there were always some things that came out of nowhere that caught one off guard. Humans called it an accident. It was impossible to be prepared for everything in life. When an accident came, what people had to do was not to complain, but to think about how to accept it. Jilin did a simple mental preparation. Looking at the Elven Queen, he took out his dragon scale sword. Jilin held the huge sword that was hundreds of meters long in his hand. A slight movement could stir up the wind and clouds. Jilin bared his fangs. Every scale on his body was tightly closed. Jilin raised the dragon scale sword and slashed with all his might. Before the dragon scale sword landed, the sea had already split. The Elven Queen did not dodge the sword that seemed to have fallen from the sky. She raised her fist and hit the falling dragon scale sword. Jilin's eyes were filled with hostility. A similar scene had happened before. The Elven Queen took the dragon scale sword with her bare hands. Previously, the Elven Queen threw out a total of 2 punches. The first punch sent the dragon scale sword flying. The second punch sent Jilin flying. Jilin felt that this time, he was confident that he could cut off the Elven Queen's hand. Clang! The Elven Queen's fair fist collided with the ferocious dragon scale sword. What came out was the sound of metal colliding with stone. F***CK. Jilin cursed instinctively. Under the influence of the Forbidden Land, the Elven Queen could still take on the divine weapon that he made with his dragon tooth with her bare hands. She could even make his hand go numb. Jilin narrowed his eyes and started the second slash, the third slash, the fourth slash, the fifth slash. Jilin's attack suddenly changed. This time, Jilin held the sword in one hand and pointed, stabbed, and slashed at the Elven Queen from hundreds of meters away. Both swords still had energy to spare. The dragon scale sword no longer looked like a sword, but more like a living snake. Incomparably nimble and unpredictable. He would always attack the Elven Queen from tricky angles. Once he missed, he would immediately pull back and stab again. Jilin's sword made use of the Elven Queen's rebounding force to counterattack. Jilin's sword became faster and faster, faster and faster. Gradually, the dragon scale sword turned into phantoms as its power increased. At this moment, Jilin was unleashing a torrential barrage of attacks, and each of his sword strikes was actually much stronger than his previous full-powered sword strike. This was a sword technique. Human swordsmanship. The Sword Saint's swordsmanship was a swordsmanship that leveraged force against force. Flowing wind returning snow. When Jilin performed it, he actually had both the body and the body. Presumably, even the Sword Saint, Gaimenua, would concede defeat in front of Jilin's swordsmanship and willingly give up the title of Sword Saint. Humans were probably the best creatures at defeating the strong as the weak. Their bodies were not as strong and agile as wild beasts, but they were the overlords of the world. They made weapons, studied swordsmanship, fist techniques, and other martial arts. With their human bodies, they defeated countless enemies that they could not defeat. At this moment, how similar was Jilin to a human? Facing the Elven Queen who was far stronger than him, he used tricks, weapons, and techniques to defeat the strong as the weak. In just a few seconds, Jilin had already slashed more than 100 times. His attacks had become like a storm that could topple mountains and overturn seas. The Elven Queen was still resisting with her fists. The Elven Queen did not use any fist techniques. She only punched with extreme speed and accuracy. He simply and unpretentiously repelled the aggressive dragon scale sword that could split open the sea and the mountains again and again. This could also be said to be a great skill that could defeat 10 great skills. In the beginning, the Elven Queen could easily knock back Jilin's sword. However, as Jilin's sword became heavier and more ferocious, the Elven Queen was also beginning to be injured. Golden blood began to sprinkle from the Elven Queen's fists. From afar, it looked as if the Elven Queen was holding a handful of golden powder in each hand and was sprinkling it. However, Jilin knew that was not the case. As a member of the dragon race, he knew very well what it was. This was God's blood. Moreover, it was extremely high-level God's blood. A faint smile appeared on Jilin's face. He had finally injured the Elven Queen. Jilin's confidence was greatly boosted. The flowing wind returning snow was even more powerful. In fact, Jilin could see that every slash of the dragon scale sword could only cause extremely small injuries to the Elven Queen. Moreover, the Elven Queen's recovery ability was even higher than his. The speed of Jilin's swordsmanship at this moment was shocking. He could slash dozens of times in 2 seconds. However, the Elven Queen's recovery ability was even more terrifying. She could perfectly heal the wounds on her fists between Jilin's 2 slashes. However, Jilin was not discouraged. As long as he could make the other party bleed, he would have a chance to kill her. However, he forgot. The Elven Queen was not just a punching bag. The Elven Queen suddenly took a step back in the air. Jilin's sword missed. He did not expect the Elven Queen to take a step back. His flowing wind returning snow was airtight, sealing off all the Elven Queen's attack routes. The Elven Queen could only passively take a beating. However, he forgot. No, he did not expect that such a proud being like the Elven Queen would actually take a step back. The dragon scale sword paused slightly due to the shock of missing its target. The Elven Queen seized this critical moment and tore off a light veil from her body. She split it into 2 and wrapped it around her hands. It's useless. Jilin looked at the Elven Queen and said with a glaring golden light in his eyes, under the influence of the Forbidden Land, all your divine weapons are useless. Yes, I know. The Elven Queen said, but I didn't want it to be useful in the first place. I just wanted to make use of its sturdiness. The Elven Queen's veil was a piece of fog in the world, a piece of cloud. It was unknown which god plucked it from the sky and refined it into a piece of light veil. When the Elven Queen did not use it, it was the fog on the Elven Island that could make travelers get lost in it. When the Elven Queen used it, it could absorb all the enemy's attacks, like a clay ox entering the sea, the strongest defensive divine weapon. However, when the light of the Forbidden Land of the Dragon Clan shone on it, it became an ordinary piece of cloth and no longer had those magical effects. Even so, it was still the strongest cloth in the world. It was a cloth that could wrap and resist divine weapons made of dragon teeth. Not bad swordsmanship. The Elven Queen looked at Jilin with admiration. This is the reason why I see you in a different light. It is also the difference between you and the other dragons. If it were the other dragons, even if they were to die, they would not use the human way of fighting, using a sword and displaying swordsmanship. Unfortunately, although you are more humble than the other dragons, you are also more despicable than the other dragons. You have no bottom line. Sigh. You can't have your cake and eat it too. You're tuning into the Mythic Realms YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.